Shin and Rudy stand before a flickering digital interface that displays meticulous measurements of a woman's physique, specifically highlighting a chest size of 100 and a waist of 25. The data suggests that the current state is considered too thin, proposing a revolutionary, character-making process through newly acquired gourmet guides and cosplay. They observe the display together, the weight of this new, ambitious goal hanging in the air as they contemplate the journey ahead. With the plan established, he stands in the kitchen, clad in an apron and brandishing a frying pan like a weapon of transformation. With a cookbook in hand and a spark of intense determination in his eyes, the young man declares that the first chapter of their journey begins now, prompted by the realization that she has lost too much weight. Behind him, his friend looks on with a mix of confusion and resignation, seemingly caught in the wake of his sudden, fervent passion for her physical overhaul. He is already awake as the sun rises over the quiet neighborhood, his mind likely already churning with the day's nutritional plans. Meanwhile, Rudy awakens in her room with a stretch and a yawn, the morning light filtering through the window as she prepares to face the first day of this new regimen. While she remains tucked away in another room, the night of intense gaming reaches its climax as the screen flashes with victory. Shin lets out a triumphant shout, his hands raised in the air as he confirms a critical hit that clears the final stage. Beside him, his companion shares in the exhilaration of their hard-won success. As the morning sun begins to filter through the room, the exhaustion of their all-nighter starts to settle in. The young man greets the new day with a weary but satisfied smile, acknowledging his friend Yuto while the end screen glows softly in the background. Despite the lack of sleep, the sense of accomplishment is palpable. He, seated before a steaming breakfast, shifts the conversation from the thrill of victory to a more analytical critique of the experience. He meticulously breaks down the game's mechanics, noting that increasing the attacker's critical rate makes the combat feel unbalanced. To him, the tactical depth was lacking, even if the character designs were the main draw. He watches as his friend savors the rich flavor of the miso soup, his mind still lingering on the technical artistry of the game they just finished. He points out that the level of detail in the 3D models, especially for characters like Lapis Lazuli, was clearly a priority for the developers, suggesting that the visual appeal was meant to compensate for the gameplay flaws. He beams with pride as he gestures toward the bowl, emphasizing the secret ingredient that gives the meal its kick. The clams, he explains with a mischievous grin, are the key to the soup's robust flavor, a small culinary victory to match their digital one. This dedication to nutrition is part of a larger philosophy he holds regarding his lifestyle. He explains that maintaining a healthy body is essential for enduring long gaming sessions, viewing his diet as a way to optimize his performance and enjoy his hobby to the fullest every single day, much to the amusement of his more casual friend. With the meal finished and their spirits high, the two prepare to leave the quiet comfort of the home. The morning air is crisp as they step outside, the transition from the dim glow of the monitors to the bright reality of the world marking the start of a new adventure. He clutches the tickets for the upcoming game festival, his excitement building as he reminds his friend that this event has been 7 days in the making. This gathering was the primary reason for their intense preparation, and he is eager to dive back into the world of gaming after a quick goodbye to Rudy at the door. However, the momentum is suddenly halted by the sharp ring of a mobile phone. His expression shifts from excitement to confusion as Yuto checks the screen and sheepishly admits that he has to take a call from his girlfriend, leaving the plans for the festival hanging in the balance. The betrayal is finalized as his friend prepares to depart, offering a parting bit of advice about finding a life outside of games. He stands there, stunned and protesting the broken promise, while Yuto walks away, leaving him to face the reality of the day without his gaming partner. He waves a casual goodbye, his voice trailing off with a promise to set his friend up with someone in the future as an apology for leaving so abruptly. Shin stands alone on the sidewalk, watching his companion depart for a date, left with nothing but his festival tickets and a sense of abandonment. Later, as the train pulls into the bustling station, he reflects on the stark difference between his solitary gaming life and the reality of having a girlfriend. Stepping onto the platform, he joins the thrall of people heading toward the massive convention center, the air thick with anticipation. Inside the cavernous hall, the sheer scale of the event is overwhelming, but his eyes suddenly lock onto something in the distance that cuts through the noise of the crowd. He observes a cosplayer posing for photos, a sight that reinforces his personal philosophy. As a man, he refuses to compromise on his pursuit of the perfect 2D ideal, even in this sea of 3D imitations. His gaze then falls upon a figure that stops him in his tracks, a woman dressed as the heroine Lapis Lazuli, her costume a meticulous recreation of the character he knows so well. Comparing the woman before him to the official art on his phone, he can't help but feel a pang of disappointment, noting that her slender frame lacks the physical presence of the digital original. As he walks past, he mutters a harsh critique under his breath, lamenting the waste of such a good costume on someone who doesn't have the right build to fill it out properly. The cosplayer's head snaps toward him, her expressive eyes wide with a mixture of shock and hurt as his callous words reach her ears. He freezes, a cold sweat breaking out as the realization hits him that his private commentary was far from private. Amidst the low hum of the surrounding crowd, he realizes with a jolt of panic that she heard every word, turning what was meant to be a simple observation into a very public and awkward encounter. He stands amidst the bustling crowd, mesmerized by the cosplayer's performance. She embodies the character Katlia with such precision that he finds himself questioning if it's merely acting. The onlookers around him are equally captivated, praising her ability to match the character's image so perfectly. Their voices a hum of admiration that fills the air. Despite the praise from the crowd, he can't help but notice a slight discrepancy in her physique compared to the original character. However, the voices behind him continue to chime in with agreement, reinforcing the idea that someone had finally captured the essence of the role, regardless of the minor physical differences. He struggles to recall the cosplayer's name while his gaze lingers on the intricate, revealing details of her outfit. He acknowledges that while the costume is daring, it successfully captures the character's allure, a fact that seems to resonate deeply with the gathered fans who are transfixed by her presence. The young woman, known to the crowd as Lapis Lazuli, extends a hand with a confident, practiced grace. Her expression is a perfect blend of the character's stoicism and a subtle, inviting warmth that draws the eyes of everyone in the vicinity. He watches as she expertly navigates the attention, knowing exactly how to play to the cameras. But the professional display is suddenly interrupted when her foot catches, sending her tumbling toward the floor as the crowd gasps in collective surprise. The rhythm of the event momentarily shattered. Because of the sudden fall, a fellow cosplayer dressed as a heroic knight rushes to her side, offering a hand. She quickly dismisses the concern with a lighthearted remark, insisting she simply slipped and that there's no need for alarm, even as the crowd remains hushed in the wake of the accident. Looking up with a radiant, slightly embarrassed smile, she catches his eye and asks if he is lost or simply wandering. The directness of her gaze and the sweetness of her voice leave him feeling as though he has stepped into a waking dream, the reality of the convention floor blurring with the fantasy of her costume. After the brief, heart-pounding encounter, he decides it is time to depart, his mind buzzing with the realization that cosplay allows people to become whoever they wish. He makes his way toward the exit, eager to return to the comfort of his own home and the familiar world of his video games, leaving the spectacle behind. As he walks, he reflects on the impossibility of ever meeting a true heroine in the real world, dismissing the encounter as a fleeting moment of theater. Unbeknownst to him, the young woman remains behind, her expression shifting into one of quiet, somber contemplation as she watches the crowd thin out. Later, his focus shifts entirely to the mundane tasks of daily life as he visits a local market. He finds a sense of triumph in the evening sales, gathering groceries with a satisfied grin, his brief brush with the extraordinary already fading into the background of his routine as he prepares for a quiet night in. He is making his way home through the quiet residential streets when he spots a figure slumped against a brick wall in a narrow alleyway. The girl appears distressed, her head bowed as she leans heavily against the cold surface. Pausing in his tracks, he takes a closer look, noting the beads of sweat on her forehead and her ragged breathing. It is clear to him that something is very wrong. He approaches her with a mix of concern and his usual awkward philosophy, suggesting that one must maintain a healthy soul if they ever hope to meet their ideal heroine. He offers a hand, trying to be helpful despite the strange nature of his words. The girl, however, is in no mood for his interference, sharply telling him to leave her alone. Undeterred, he points out that sitting directly on the pavement isn't good for her, his persistence clearly starting to grate on her nerves. As he continues to ramble about healthy souls and proper behavior, she looks up at him with a mixture of disbelief and growing irritation. He seems oblivious to how bothersome his lecture has become to someone clearly in physical or emotional distress. Suddenly, her eyes narrow in recognition, and she accuses him of being the pervert who was staring at her throughout the entire cosplay event. The accusation hangs in the air, shifting the dynamic of their encounter instantly. He is stunned into silence, his confusion mounting as she fixes him with a cold, judgmental glare. She tells him flatly that his gaze is dirty, leaving him scrambling to understand how she could possibly know him from the festival. The realization hits him with the force of a physical blow as he looks past her current disheveled state and sees the image of the Lapis Lazuli cosplayer. She smirks at his shock, enjoying the moment of his sudden, embarrassing epiphany. She lets out a long, weary exhale, leaning back against the wall with a look of utter exhaustion. She asks him if he has truly forgotten his own childhood friend, calling him Idiot Shinkuen in a tone that is both familiar and deeply exasperated. His eyes widen in total disbelief as the final piece of the puzzle clicks into place. The girl sitting in the dirt, the glamorous heroine from the stage, and his longtime friend are all the same person, Ruri. He recalls their shared past, a time when they were as close as siblings, living in adjacent houses. As the years passed, however, that natural bond began to fade, leaving them as mere acquaintances. Looking at her now, he can't help but notice how much she has changed, expressing concern over her frail appearance and questioning if she is even eating enough. She reacts with sharp hostility, telling him to stay out of her affairs. Because of his scrutiny, she lashes out further, accusing him of being a pervert and a molester for staring at her. When he tries to defend himself, she explains that her slender frame is a requirement for the characters she portrays, dismissing his concern as unwanted interference. She continues her verbal assault, mocking his lack of experience with women and calling him a virgin with no sense of delicacy. The insults sting, leaving him reeling from the sheer bluntness of her words. The young man stares at her, his mental image of the sweet childhood friend he once knew crumbling before his eyes. The contrast between the girl and his memories and the abrasive woman standing there is jarring. With a dismissive huff, she declares that reality is ultimately disappointing, her expression one of cynical exhaustion. He sighs, noticing that her complexion has grown even more ghostly than before. Suddenly, she winces, a sharp cry of pain escaping her lips as her strength seems to fail. Seeing her struggle, He offers his shoulder for support, but she stubbornly tries to push him away, claiming she can make it back on her own. He refuses to listen to her protests, firmly telling her to be quiet and lean on him so they can finally get moving. They eventually reach their destination, the two houses standing side by side just as they always have. He muses to himself that in the world of games, such a good deed would surely be met with a grand reward. Instead of a treasure, he finds himself in his living room with a completely exhausted girl collapsed on his sofa. He realizes that in this harsh reality, the only reward for saving the heroine is having to look after her while her health is depleted. He stands over her, tentatively asking if he can borrow the unreleased material from the day's event. She, however, is in no mood for conversation, bluntly telling him to shut up and leave her to her exhaustion. Despite her dismissal, he examines the disc she brought, noting the helpful sticky notes attached to the trial version of a future release. He observes that it lacks an opening sequence, realizing the work is still very much in progress. Turning back toward the sofa, he watches her curled up form, a sense of helplessness washing over him as he realizes the difficulty of her current state. The silence is suddenly broken by a loud, unmistakable growl from her stomach. She tenses up, her face flushing with a mix of hunger and irritation as he looks on in surprise. When he dares to ask why she seems so agitated, she responds by hurling a pillow directly at his face. She shouts for him to be quiet, her frustration boiling over at the perceived intrusion. Retreating slightly toward the kitchen area, he tries to soothe her, suggesting that her temper is likely fueled by hunger. He insists that her body requires proper nutrition and rest to recover from the day's strain. He continues his gentle prodding, remarking that a bit more weight would actually help her fill out her costumes more effectively. She remains huddled on the cushions, a small, defeated admission escaping her lips that she has indeed tried. She finally sits up, her expression sour as she voices her disdain for food, claiming that meat is nothing but grease and vegetables have the unappealing scent of grass. To her, eating is a chore her body simply rejects. He listens quietly, acknowledging the weight of her words as the reality of her struggle with self-care becomes clearer. She explains the intense pressure she feels, revealing that the stress and lack of sleep before an event make it impossible for her to eat. In her mind, the only thing that matters is the perfection of the image reflected in the mirror at the venue, regardless of the physical toll. She reflects on how the events she participated in changed her perspective, her gaze cast downward in a moment of somber realization. Because of those experiences, she recalls the joy she once felt, smiling brightly while immersed in her games and surrounded by the things she loved, a stark contrast to her current state. In those moments, she truly believed she could transform into the character she admired most, someone defined by a gentle and compassionate spirit that could inspire others. However, the weight of reality has crushed that dream, leaving her collapsed on the sofa, admitting through her tears that she has utterly failed to live up to that ideal. Shin watches her, his expression hardening as he realizes that the very essence of the heroine she strives to be would never want her to endure such misery and self-neglect. This realization triggers a memory of their childhood, where a young boy promised to protect his heroine, while a young girl dreamed of nothing more than being someone worth protecting. Returning to the present, he softly acknowledges her pain with a quiet "I see," while she remains curled into a ball, the silence of the room punctuated only by her soft, rhythmic sobs. Determined to change the atmosphere, he picks up a large pumpkin and asks what she plans to eat, dismissing her suggestion of convenience store food as he checks for any dietary dislikes. Without waiting for a formal invitation, he declares his intent to use her kitchen and immediately begins preparing the vegetable, ignoring her startled confusion as he starts the water and readies the knife. As the aroma of cooking begins to fill the air, he asks if she has a preference for sweet flavors, his focused movements at the stove offering a stark, comforting contrast to her earlier despair. He announces with a cheerful chime that the meal is ready. Presenting the result, a steaming cup of rich pumpkin potage sits before her, glistening under the light. He reassures her that such a comforting dish is surprisingly easy to prepare at home, while she stares at the bowl with a mix of hesitation and growing appetite. The aroma proves too much for her to resist, and her body betrays her with a loud, echoing growl from her stomach. She clutches her midsection, her face flushing with deep embarrassment as the hunger she tried to suppress becomes impossible to ignore. Flustered by the sudden gesture, she questions why he would suddenly start cooking for her. He responds casually, admitting that leaving her to cry alone would have weighed on his conscience and ruined his own sleep, making his intervention a matter of practical peace of mind. He gestures toward the food, urging her to eat her fill since she hasn't been feeling well. His tone is gentle but firm, insisting that once she finishes the meal, she must get some much-needed rest. A soft, genuine smile plays across his features as he watches her. There is a quiet warmth in his gaze, reflecting a sincere desire to see her recover and find some comfort in the simple meal he prepared. Slowly, a spoon dips into the thick, creamy potage, lifting a generous portion of the golden liquid. The texture is smooth and inviting, promising the warmth she so desperately needs. She finally takes a bite, her eyes fluttering shut as the flavors hit her palate. A look of pure bliss washes over her face, the initial tension melting away as she savors the first taste of the homemade soup. The warmth of the meal seems to radiate through her entire being, eliciting a soft moan of satisfaction. She hunches over slightly, cradling her stomach as the nourishing potage begins to soothe the physical and emotional exhaustion that had been weighing her down. Continuing to eat, she marvels at the natural sweetness of the pumpkin. The heat spreads through her limbs like a gentle embrace, providing a sense of security and comfort she hadn't realized she was missing. She feels the warmth of the soup spreading through her, a sensation of pure comfort that seems to fill her very soul. As she continues to eat, savoring every spoonful, he watches her with a quiet sense of accomplishment, glad to see her enjoying the meal so much. He explains that the light meal is designed for easy digestion, ensuring she can get a full day's rest and sleep soundly tonight. She moves on to a piece of toast, chewing slowly and silently as she processes the simple kindness of the gesture. Watching her, he can't help but wonder if the sweetness and high-calorie count of the meal might cause her to gain a bit of weight, though he keeps the thought to himself. Seizing the moment of calm, he asks if he might borrow the demo room she has, hoping their improved rapport will make her more agreeable. He reflects on a warning from a friend about her tendency to throw tantrums, but he views their current arrangement as a mutually beneficial exchange of food for favors, even as she playfully tells him to get lost. The next morning, he is jolted awake by a sudden weight and a sharp cry of pain as she looms over him in his bed. She is in a state of panic, clutching at her midsection and lamenting the fact that she has gained nearly 800 grams overnight. Looking down at her, he finds himself struck by her appearance, his mind racing with the possibility of molding her into his ideal image while she desperately pleads for his help. She straddles him, her nightgown pulled high, calling out his name with a desperate plea for assistance. He stares up at her, completely bewildered, questioning exactly what kind of help she could possibly need in such a compromising position. The young woman simply smiles down at him, her expression unreadable, while he begins to grasp the sheer absurdity and danger of their current predicament. Realizing the impropriety, he awkwardly requests that she lower her garment and move away, prompting a look of stunned realization from her. This request triggers a sudden outburst of defensive embarrassment as she screams accusations of indecency, forcing him to frantically hush her to avoid alerting the neighbors. Attempting to erase the memory of the awkward encounter, she performs a playful, desperate gesture to make him forget, though he remains unimpressed by the display. Seeking to normalize the morning, he moves to the television to start a game while she stands nearby, still visibly shaken by the earlier tension. As he settles into play, he explains that waking up early naturally leads to a desire for entertainment, ignoring her complaints about his casual attitude. She leans in, her eyes widening as she recognizes the game on the screen, but he quickly warns her not to interfere now that the combat has commenced. After a swift victory, they both watch the screen where the warrior Katlia stands triumphant, a character he knows his companion holds in high regard. She reacts with immediate indignation when the prompt to remove Katlia from the party appears on the screen. She scolds him, insisting that a character's appeal should be measured by their personality and appearance rather than mere statistics. He tries to justify the decision, noting that while the warrior starts strong, she eventually becomes a liability, but his logic falls on deaf ears as she remains steadfast in her defense of the digital heroine. Because of his skepticism, she begins a detailed breakdown of why the character is a masterpiece, starting with her physical proportions. She recites Katlia's measurements with clinical precision, arguing that her build makes her relatable, while her face and outfit are beyond reproach. He can only watch in silence as her passion for the character's design takes center stage. Continuing her lecture, she delves into the lore, explaining that Katlia's charm comes from her background as a spoiled daughter within her family. This history, she claims, makes her demanding personality endearing rather than grating. He is caught off guard, having never realized the game possessed such depth of character writing, while she remains lost in her admiration. Shifting from lore to mechanics, she demonstrates a surprising grasp of the game's inner workings by reciting complex attack formulas. She explains how specific equipment can elevate Katlia's power to incredible heights, proving that her devotion isn't just aesthetic. He finds it ironic that she values personality so much, yet has memorized the cold, hard numbers behind the character's strength. In response to her overwhelming enthusiasm, he relents and agrees to keep Katlia in the active party. Her eyes light up with joy as she notices the character has just unlocked a new ability. Eager to see the results of their discussion in action, she urges him to test the skill immediately. As the command is entered, the screen fills with the rhythmic sounds of a melodic dance. The character on the screen moves with grace, accompanied by the clinking of her ornate armor. She watches with bated breath, fully immersed in the digital performance. Suddenly, the boundary between the game and reality blurs as she leaps to her feet. With a dramatic flourish and a voice full of conviction, she strikes a powerful pose and shouts the name of the ultimate attack, a passionate Mateo. The air in the room seems to vibrate with the intensity of her performance. The sudden outburst sends him reeling in shock, his hands trembling as he looks back at her. He calls out her name, Ruri-san, his voice laced with confusion and alarm at her sudden transformation. She remains frozen in her heroic stance, her expression one of pure, unadulterated focus. After the moment passes, she offers a sheepish explanation, claiming that striking a pose upon hearing a chant is simply an occupational hazard for a dedicated cosplayer. He can only stare, sweat dropping at the realization of just how deeply her hobby has permeated her daily life. Reflecting on the display, he eventually concedes that it is natural for someone to go to extremes when they are truly devoted to their craft. They settle back into their seats, the shared experience of the game creating a strange but undeniable bond between the two of them. He listens as she declares her love for both the character and the game, her face lit with a genuine, joyful smile. As she continues, she explains that while the character is proud and honest, she often makes mistakes. Yet, it is the support of her friends and the protagonist that allows her to recover every time, proving her true strength. She becomes increasingly lost in her own world, Her cheeks flushed as she describes the emotional climax where love ultimately saves the hero, leaving him to marvel at her intense dedication. However, when he points out that she might be too thin for the role, her mood shifts instantly to a pout, as she defensively argues that wearing the costume is the only way she can truly connect with the character. The excitement proves to be too much, and she suddenly collapses to the floor with a dizzy spell, prompting him to rush to her side in concern while she weakly explains she simply stood up too fast. Seeing that she needs proper nourishment, he checks the clock and decides to prepare a meal, instructing her to rest quietly while he ties on his apron. He scans the contents of the refrigerator, searching for the right ingredients until he finally spots exactly what he needs to make a restorative dish. With a plan in mind, he begins rhythmically dicing vegetables, his movements precise and practiced as she watches from a distance, still recovering from her lightheadedness. The kitchen is filled with the energetic sound of his chopping, a cacophony so intense that she wonders if he is overexerting himself, though he remains focused and determined. Finally, he presents the finished meal, a steaming plate of curry, which she accepts with a mix of surprise and the realization that this was exactly what she had anticipated. She sits across from him at the small dining table, the air still humming with the memory of the loud mechanical whirring from the kitchen. He asks if she is all right, noting the unusual sounds that had emanated from his preparation area. Having received the steaming bowl, she lifts a spoonful to her lips with a cheerful word of thanks. He watches her closely, a hint of nervous anticipation in his voice as he wonders aloud if the recipe turned out as intended. As the first bite touches her tongue, her eyes widen in a sudden, sharp realization of the flavor. The rich aroma fills her senses, and she can't help but let out a soft sound of surprise at the unexpected quality of the meal. He begins to explain the logic behind his culinary experiment, noting that her recent dizzy spell was likely a result of iron deficiency. To combat this, he reveals that he used the mixer to blend nutrient-rich ingredients, even those she typically dislikes, into a smooth, flavorful paste. She is stunned, finally understanding why the taste is so much more complex and layered than any curry she has had before. A warm flush creeps across her cheeks as she continues to eat, savoring the special meal he created specifically for her. She leans into her hand, her expression softening with a mix of gratitude and pure enjoyment of the food. The realization that this food could help her gain the weight she needs brings a bright, determined smile to her face. He watches her, perhaps a bit surprised by her sudden shift in energy as she declares her intent to improve her physique. She reminds him of his own words from the previous day, pointing out that he was the one who warned her about being too thin. He can only offer a sheepish, slightly confused look in response to her sharp memory. Her gaze softens, turning slightly downward as she confesses her deeper feelings. She admits that she is tired of being judged by others and wants to take control of how she is perceived. This desire for change is rooted in her passion for cosplay. She explains that with his cooking, she can finally build the body necessary to truly embody her idol, Katlia. The image of the powerful warrior looms in her mind as a goal she is now determined to reach. With a look of earnest vulnerability, she makes a request that hangs heavy in the quiet room. She asks if he would be willing to cook for her every single day, leaving him momentarily speechless at the weight of her proposal. He stares ahead, lost in thought, realizing that if he remains stagnant, nothing will ever change. He knows he cannot afford to lose weight again and must take action to improve his health. Across the table, Otoha leans forward with a desperate plea, her eyes wide and imploring. Shin is caught off guard by the intensity of her request, jokingly asking if this is a marriage proposal, but her persistence eventually wears him down until he finally agrees. Her face flushes a deep crimson as she processes his acceptance, her voice trembling with excitement as she confirms his willingness. He tries to downplay the commitment, explaining that cooking is merely a hobby and he has plenty of spare time between his university classes, but she remains intensely focused on the promise he just made. A moment later, Shin rubs the back of his neck, a sheepish smile on his face as he admits to feeling a bit guilty about his initial hesitation. She stands nearby, still radiating a nervous energy from their exchange. The mood lightens as she joyfully digs into her meal, her face lighting up with every bite. She mentions with a mix of pride and concern that she gained nearly a kilogram from the previous day's soup, a fact that surprises him, but she is undeterred, viewing it as progress towards sculpting her physique to match her idol. Her determination only grows as she explains her plan to be fully prepared before the next big release. She gestures to herself, confident that she can achieve the specific look she desires in time for the upcoming event. Suddenly, she stands up and points toward her chest, declaring her new goal for the sequel of her favorite game. She explains that the character Katlia is expected to have an even more impressive figure in the new installment, leaving him speechless and slightly overwhelmed by her bluntness. To prove her point, she pulls up the official website on a screen, showing him the latest announcements. He leans in, curious about the news she missed while she was busy with the previous day's events. Shin's eyes widen in genuine shock as he sees the updates for himself. The screen displays a striking image of the character's enhanced features, confirming everything she had just described. He can only stare in silence, finally understanding the scale of the challenge she has set for herself. He pauses in disbelief, his gaze fixed on the screen as the sheer scale of the character's redesign becomes apparent. Staring at the device, he wonders aloud how such a drastic physical transformation is even possible for the sequel. Otoha, undeterred by the absurdity, strikes the exact same pose as the digital warrior, looking back at him with a mischievous glint in her eyes as she asks if her form is correct and if he is truly prepared to assist her in this transformation. Shin sits in a lecture hall, his pen poised over his notebook as the professor discusses the complexities of female physiology. The lecture delves into measurements and hormonal influences, topics that seem far removed from his daily life. Yet he diligently records the information, even as the questions from other students become increasingly specific and intense. Later that evening, he returns to his apartment only to find a familiar figure scrambling through his window. Otoha, draped in an oversized hoodie, greets him with a sharp reprimand for his tardiness, her presence as sudden and unconventional as ever. She finishes her clumsy entrance, her thoughts immediately turning to her stomach. With a demanding tone, she asks what the menu for the evening entails, making it clear that her hunger is the priority of the moment. He watches her, the day's lecture still fresh in his mind. As she shoots him a disgruntled look, he silently muses that perhaps bovine hormones would be more effective for her desired transformation than the human variety the professor described. The young man tells her to be patient while he prepares the meal, jokingly referring to himself as Mama, which earns him a swift, annoyed retort. He reminds her of the dangers of her preferred entrance method, though his words seem to fall on deaf ears. They both remember the agreement they made, to share meals so she can achieve the physique of the warrior character she admires. With the goal set, he dons his apron and cap, ready to fulfill his part of the bargain in the kitchen. He reflects on the practicality of their arrangement as he begins the preparation. Since her family is often away and she lacks the motivation to cook for herself, providing meals for both of them is a logical solution that benefits everyone involved. As the sizzle of meat fills the air, he finds himself contemplating the shift in his routine. Being responsible for her nutrition has brought a new perspective to his life, one he hadn't expected when this arrangement began. He soon presents a carefully crafted handmade hamburger steak, a dish that highlights one of her many quirks. Despite her aspirations for a more mature figure, her tastes remain decidedly simple, favoring the comfort of a child's favorite meal. She stares at the generous portion with a mix of anticipation and doubt, questioning if she can finish it all given her modest appetite. He watches her with a quiet smile, noting the contrast between her grand ambitions and her current reality. She sits across from him at the small dining table, hesitant as he encourages her to begin the meal. With a soft word of thanks, she lifts her fork and takes the first bite of the steaming hamburger steak. As she chews, a look of surprise crosses her face, her eyes widening at the unexpected texture. She realizes that the meat has been blended with tofu, making it remarkably light and easy to eat. She is left momentarily speechless as he confirms her suspicion with a knowing smile, explaining that he specifically designed this light and fluffy menu so she could consume a larger portion without feeling overwhelmed. He notes that the recipe was crafted to allow her to eat a significant amount comfortably. He observes as she discovers another secret hidden within the steak, a rich, melted center of cheese that spills out with the next cut. It is one of her favorite ingredients, and her excitement is visible. She listens as he continues to detail his culinary choices, mentioning the light hamburger sauce and the coarse pepper he added to ensure the flavor remained engaging throughout the meal. He explains that the cheese was added specifically to prevent the dish from becoming monotonous. He asks for her opinion as she continues to eat with newfound gusto, her previous hesitation completely gone. She enthusiastically declares that the meal is far beyond just delicious, finding it even better than she imagined. She is struck by a sudden realization as she considers the ingredients: soy from the tofu and dairy from the cheese. She beams with joy, recognizing that he chose these specifically because they are known to support the physical development and hormonal balance she is striving for. She praises his thoughtfulness, realizing he selected the most effective ingredients for her growth. With her motivation renewed, she finds the meal incredibly easy to finish, savoring every bite as the clock on the wall marks the passage of time. She marvels at how simple it is to consume such a large portion when it is prepared this way. Finally, she leans back, completely satisfied and patting her stomach after clearing the plate. She offers a sincere word of thanks, her face flushed with contentment and the physical warmth of a full meal. She and her companion remain inside as the quiet night settles over the neighborhood, the lights of the house glowing warmly against the dark sky. He asks one last time if the meal truly suited her tastes. Otoha expresses her heartfelt gratitude, genuinely amazed by the meticulous thought Shin put into the meal specifically for her benefit. He seems caught off guard by the sudden, earnest praise, questioning what she means while she insists that his efforts are nothing short of amazing. She leans her head on her hand, a small, satisfied smirk playing on her lips as she offers a backhanded compliment, admitting the effort wasn't bad for someone like him. He can't help but wonder if this playful deflection is her unique way of saying thank you. Suddenly, she leans forward with intense, desperate determination, her posture emphasizing the very physical goals she is striving to reach. She pleads for his continued guidance, declaring her willingness to do anything if it means achieving the powerful physique she desires. He stares back, clearly flustered by her sudden proximity and the heavy weight of her words. He warns her that offering anything to an otaku is a dangerous proposition that could be easily misinterpreted. The gravity of his statement hangs in the air as she pauses, the implications of her own desperation finally starting to sink in. A silent realization dawns on her, her eyes widening as she processes the warning and the potential misunderstanding she nearly invited. Breaking the tension, he explains that to see real progress, they need a solid baseline of data, including weekly measurements of her chest, waist, and hips, along with a detailed diet log. She recoils slightly at the mention of recording her weight, a common point of insecurity that makes her hesitate for a moment. Despite her hesitation, she reaffirms her commitment, reminding him that as a dedicated cosplayer, she is prepared for whatever the challenge requires. He suggests that taking regular photos would be the most effective way to visually track her physical transformation over time. She immediately warms to the idea, seeing the undeniable logic in visual documentation for her journey. With a playful, sharp warning for him not to peek, she heads toward the other room to change into something more suitable for the first set of progress shots. Once alone, she begins to undress, pulling her top over her head with a focused expression. The room is filled with the quiet rustle of fabric as she prepares for the next clinical step of their transformation plan. Standing in her delicate undergarments, she surveys her wardrobe, considering which outfit will best serve as a benchmark for her journey toward becoming the warrior Katlia. She stands by the open window in her undergarments, her silhouette clear against the light, while he watches from his own room. He tries to defend himself against her teasing accusations of being a pervert, though his gaze lingers longer than it should. He becomes visibly flustered, gesturing wildly as he insists that she is the one providing the openings by not being more discreet. He demands that she close the window immediately to end the awkward display. Moments later, a sudden, piercing scream erupts from her room, catching him completely off guard. He stares toward her window, his expression shifting from annoyance to genuine alarm at the unexpected outburst. The young woman then peeks out from behind her curtains, now wrapped tightly in a blanket with a mischievous glint in her eyes. She suggests postponing their session, leaving him standing there in a state of utter confusion. After a brief delay, she finally reveals herself, stepping into the room wearing a daringly skimpy black lace outfit that leaves very little to the imagination. She apologizes for the wait, her posture slightly hesitant as she stands before him in the new attire. He reacts with wide-eyed astonishment, prompting her to explain her choice of clothing. She reasons that since her Katlia costume covers her arms and legs, this more revealing outfit is necessary to accurately document her physical progress. When he asks why she hasn't struck a pose yet, she looks at him with a flushed face and a dazed, overwhelmed expression. The sheer intimacy of the situation seems to be catching up to her, making it difficult to maintain her composure. He suddenly suggests taking partial photos to focus on specific areas, which sends her into a state of shock. She stammers in disbelief as he enthusiastically points out that capturing her thighs would be beneficial for their data tracking. Despite his own internal fluster, he tries to maintain a professional demeanor, checking his equipment and insisting that this approach is logically sound. He urges her to begin, even as he struggles to understand the chaotic energy she is projecting. The lens finally focuses, framing a close-up of her legs and the intricate details of the lace hemline. The clinical nature of the photograph contrasts sharply with the palpable tension filling the room. She stands frozen as the young man adjusts his grip on the camera, his face flushed with a heat that has nothing to do with the room's temperature. He struggles to maintain a professional distance, his mind racing with the realization of just how close he is to her. When he abruptly announces that the next focus of his lens will be her backside, she can only stare in wide-eyed shock, the clinical nature of the request clashing violently with her mounting embarrassment. Because of his insistence on thoroughness, the session continues with a series of intimate close-ups, capturing the curve of her arms and the fit of the dark lace against her skin. He remains hunched over his device, his focus bordering on the obsessive as he documents every angle, while she remains stiff, her face burning with a blush that refuses to fade. The tension thickens as he shifts his attention to her chest, a moment that requires even more precision and care. He reminds himself to stay composed, knowing that any slip in his professional demeanor could shatter the fragile cooperation they've established, even as the proximity makes his heart hammer against his ribs. Moments later, the visual documentation is supplemented by cold, hard data, with measurements for her bust, hips, and thighs appearing alongside the images on his screen. She watches him record these intimate details, her voice trembling as she questions if such specific values were truly necessary for their project, her discomfort reaching a fever pitch. In response to her growing unease, he maintains a stern, almost clinical expression, his eyes never leaving the screen as he urges her to move quickly through the remaining shots. She finds his sudden shift to a serious tone unsettling, the atmosphere in the room becoming heavy with an unspoken awkwardness that makes her want to crawl out of her skin. As the session nears its end, he instructs her to relax her arms, calling her by her character name in an attempt to refocus her on the task at hand. He promises that they are almost finished, but the weight of the situation seems to be pressing down on her, making even the simplest movement feel like an impossible chore. Suddenly, she finds she can no longer maintain the facade, her voice cracking as she admits that she simply cannot continue. He looks up, caught off guard by the sudden break in her resolve, his confusion evident as he tries to process her sudden refusal. The dam finally breaks, and she lashes out, calling him a spoiled brat as her embarrassment transforms into a defensive anger. She stands there, trembling and flushed, the indignity of the entire process finally becoming too much for her to bear in silence. Gesturing toward her midsection, she reveals the true source of her sudden distress, the slight softness of her belly, which she feels has become far too prominent after their meal. Her self-consciousness is palpable as she looks down at herself, convinced that the photos will only highlight what she perceives as a glaring flaw in her physique. Overwhelmed by the thought of having her post-meal body documented so thoroughly, she declares that she will die of embarrassment and abruptly decides to leave. He is left standing alone in the room, stunned by her sudden departure and the realization that his pursuit of perfect data may have pushed her just a step too far. He stirs awake, the morning light filtering into the room as he groggily opens his eyes to face the new day. Suddenly, a vibrant presence looms over him, her voice chirping a cheerful morning greeting that contrasts sharply with his desire for a few more minutes of sleep. She acts as a relentless human alarm clock, reminding him of her beauty and presence, though he finds the energetic display quite a nuisance so early in the morning. Outside, the quiet neighborhood remains oblivious to the strange techniques of suggestion and memory manipulation being discussed within the walls of the house, where the line between reality and influence seems to blur. She playfully demands his phone, claiming she only wants to see the photos they took yesterday, though he remains skeptical of her sudden interest and the joke she makes about lending it to her. Upon receiving the device, she scrolls through the images with a critical eye, admitting that her concern over how the photos turned out is a lingering habit from her professional life, calling it an occupational disease. They huddle together on the bed, her excitement growing as she points out how surprisingly well the pictures captured the previous day's events, her enthusiasm momentarily bridging the gap between them. He becomes acutely aware of her proximity, his heart racing as she leans in close, her focus entirely on the screen, while he struggles to maintain his composure amidst the intimate contact and the realization of how overexposed some of the images are. Realizing the time, she suddenly pulls away, mentioning her upcoming classes and the need to depart quickly, even as he offers to prepare a proper breakfast to ensure she is well fed before she leaves. She heads for the door, tossing a final instruction over her shoulder for him to ensure he eats 3 full meals today, to which he simply agrees to find something on his way out, acknowledging her concern. Before leaving, she expresses her anticipation for the evening meal, leaving him to chuckle at her demanding nature while he asks if she has any specific requests for the dinner he will prepare. She leans in with a playful, demanding glint in her eyes, challenging him to prepare a dinner menu so revolutionary and exceptional that it leaves her completely satisfied. With a mischievous chuckle, she departs, claiming this high-stakes request is her unique method of keeping him motivated, while he watches her go with a mixture of resignation and resolve. Now alone in the quiet apartment, he stretches his arms overhead, acknowledging that she has truly raised the bar for today's meal. Yet he feels a surge of determination to put his best effort into the practice. Before diving into the culinary challenge, he decides to indulge in a bit of relaxation, his face lighting up with anticipation as he settles in to enjoy a video game. He begins sifting through his extensive backlog of unplayed titles to find the perfect balance for his mood, eventually striking what feels like a jackpot with a particular selection. The screen comes alive with the image of a character designated as Android Line B, a warrior who has just completed a mission. He finds himself immediately struck by her design, noting that she fits his preferences perfectly. As he watches the character navigate the digital environment, he is captivated by the fluid, detailed animations, particularly the way the graphics emphasize her movements as she climbs. He recalls how this specific title is a frequent topic of discussion within the gaming community, praise for the unique, polished motions assigned to each weapon and the way the camera angles highlight the character's appeal. A realization dawns on him as he continues to play. For the first time, he finds himself choosing a character based solely on their visual design and the grace of their movements rather than just gameplay mechanics. He remains glued to the screen, a faint sweat breaking out on his brow as he admits to himself that it isn't just her appearance that has him hooked, but the sheer quality of the action itself. He continues to analyze the digital warrior, noting how her design and combat prowess are matched only by the attention to detail in her physical animations, particularly the way her form moves realistically during her more affectionate moments. Outside, the quiet afternoon sun bathes the neighborhood, yet his focus remains entirely on the screen as he mentally recommends the experience to anyone who would listen, captivated by the high-quality production. The young man's face flushes with a mix of embarrassment and admiration as he scrolls through social media feeds, seeing that the character's specific physical traits have already gone viral among the gaming community. Suddenly, the door opens and his companion enters, catching him off guard as she peers at the screen and openly admires the character's figure, even expressing a bit of envy and a desire to achieve a similar look soon. The digital clock on the shelf ticks over to 4 in the afternoon, prompting a shocked realization from the young woman that the day has slipped away while they were preoccupied with the game. Beads of sweat form on his brow as the weight of his unfinished task finally hits him. He has spent the entire day gaming instead of preparing the exceptional menu he promised to create. In his mind, a scale tips precariously, weighing the shallow allure of the game's visuals against the genuine importance of the menu he needs to create for her, even as she asks if he can wait just a bit longer. As the clock reaches 5:20, she decides to head for a bath, leaving him to his provocative service scenes while he struggles to balance his growing hunger with his intense gaming addiction. A sharp, rhythmic sound fills the room as hands come together in a celebratory gesture, marking the end of a long journey. Having finally reached the credits, he beams with pure satisfaction, declaring the experience a masterpiece and the character the absolute best as he basks in the glow of the ending. He is riding the high of his gaming victory, already dreaming of the merchandise he'll buy to commemorate the achievement. His excitement is suddenly interrupted by a soft tapping at the window, pulling his attention away from his screen. Glancing at the clock, he realizes with a jolt that it is already past 10 at night. He rushes to the window to find her standing there in the dark, and he immediately begins to stammer out an apology for his lack of awareness. She dismisses his concerns with a calm wave of her hand, explaining that she had simply stepped out to the convenience store while he was occupied. However, she makes it clear that a simple store-bought lunchbox will not suffice for someone with her refined tastes, leaving him to wonder how he might make amends for his earlier neglect. A bead of sweat rolls down his face as the weight of his promise settles in, his expression hardening with a newfound sense of duty. He quickly invites her inside, pleading for her to come to his room, while declaring with fervent intensity that he will give this meal everything he has. As she steps through the threshold, she can't help but offer a playful rebuke, questioning what he could possibly prepare at such a late hour after neglecting her for so long. He ignores the jab, his movements becoming a blur of activity as he sets to work, while she reminds him that if the food isn't exceptional, she won't be so quick to forgive his earlier lapse. She watches him in silence, her gaze fixed on the sudden burst of energy from the man who had been lost to a digital world only moments before. To her utter astonishment, he presents a completed dish almost immediately, explaining that he has a special countermeasure menu specifically designed for the times he loses track of the world. He presents the spread with a flourish, dubbing it his ultra-time-saving premium meal. The tray is filled with various small dishes, steam rising invitingly from the central bowl. Seeing her disbelief, he begins to list the components of the feast. He points out the base is akazuke with green tea leaves, topped with steamed chicken. He continues, detailing the side dishes, grilled tomato and cheese, seaweed, and tamagoyaki, among other delicacies. Otoha can hardly believe he prepared such a variety in so little time. He reveals his secret with a confident smile, explaining that the speed was possible because the majority of the components were pre-made. He gestures toward the refrigerator, where containers of prepared ingredients were ready to be assembled at a moment's notice. Continuing his explanation, he admits that while he didn't feel the need to stock up on such things before, he realized having these ready-to-eat options would be beneficial for her. She looks up at him, her expression softening as she realizes the effort he put into planning for her needs. She finally takes a bite, her eyes widening as the flavors hit her palate. Any lingering skepticism vanishes, replaced by pure delight. She admits that in the end, the taste is the only thing that truly matters, and this meal exceeds her expectations. Focusing on the steamed chicken, she notes its surprising sweetness and how easy it is to consume. He explains that it is generously seasoned with starch, sugar, and soy sauce, creating a flavor profile that appeals to both children and adults alike. Eager for more, she reaches for the next morsel with her chopsticks. The piece of rolled egg is lifted carefully, glistening under the light as she prepares for the next taste sensation. As she savors the tamagoyaki, she describes the refreshing taste of the fish broth infused within it. She is visibly moved by the quality of the food, her cheeks flushed with satisfaction. He watches her, noting with a quiet sense of pride that she seems truly content with the meal. Outside, the moon hangs high in the dark sky, marking the passage of time as the quiet of the night settles over the neighborhood. Having finished every last bite, she offers a sincere word of thanks for the food. However, as she looks over, she realizes that 2 hours have slipped by and he has already returned to his gaming console. When she questions his immediate return to the screen, he simply explains that he was waiting for her to finish her slow, appreciative meal and had time to kill. He remains seated at the table, engrossed in his digital world, while she looms over him with a sharp reprimand. She insists that the current predicament is entirely his fault, a direct consequence of him forcing her to wait while he indulged in his gaming. Her frustration boils over, her teeth gritted as she trembles with a growing, inexplicable anger. He offers a sheepish apology, admitting that he did indeed leave her waiting for far too long, but his words do little to soothe her mounting irritation. She lets out a heavy sigh, her eyes closing as she ponders his singular devotion to his hobby. While she understands his passion, the depth of it leaves her questioning their dynamic until a sudden, radical idea strikes her. With a triumphant shout of love, she boldly lifts her skirt to catch his full attention, leaving him stunned by the sudden display. She wears a mischievous grin, confident that if she can make him fall truly in love with her, he will be far more inclined to cooperate with her whims. Later, amidst the bustling crowds of the city, he stands bewildered as a massive announcement rings out, inviting everyone to come and see the legendary Line B. The journey begins at Ikebukuro Station, a bustling urban hub where the day's events are set to unfold amidst the constant flow of commuters. Emerging into the crowd, the young man looks around in confusion, questioning if this is truly the location his companion had in mind. She quickly reminds him of their objective, pointing out that they are here to see the digital idol Line B in person, surrounded by a sea of people in various costumes. She confirms his suspicion with a knowing, triumphant smile, her eyes sparkling with the thrill of the upcoming festivities. With a grand, sweeping gesture, she reveals the vibrant spectacle of the street, declaring with pride that they have arrived at a massive cosplay event. She goes on to explain her ulterior motive, hoping that by experiencing the infectious energy of the crowd, he will finally understand her hobby and become more supportive of her own elaborate transformations. He remains silent for a long moment, a bead of sweat rolling down his temple as the sheer scale of the social gathering begins to feel overwhelming. Attempting a desperate retreat, he claims a sudden, overwhelming urge to go home and play video games, but she is too quick, grabbing his arm and insisting that this is his necessary punishment for making her wait earlier. He continues to protest, grumbling about being dragged into the chaos without warning and on an empty stomach, which leads her to concede that a proper meal should be their first priority. Moments later, she is happily devouring a large, cream-filled crepe in front of a shop, her earlier intensity replaced by the simple, focused joy of a sweet treat. As they resume their walk through the crowded streets, he asks what she intends to do next, and she simply smiles, noting that since they have already committed to the day, they might as well see it through to the end. He listens as she explains her decision to remain a spectator for the day, She admits to feeling a bit stiff and unprepared, preferring to simply observe the festivities this time around rather than participating in the spotlight. Upon reaching the entrance of East Ikebukuro Central Park, she elaborates on her reasoning, noting that if she is to cosplay again, she wants to ensure her physique is at its peak first to do the character justice. The sheer scale of the gathering takes him by surprise as they step into the heart of the park. A sea of people in various costumes fills the space, creating a vibrant, bustling atmosphere that he hadn't quite anticipated. As they navigate through the dense crowd, the surrounding urban landscape of tall buildings and lush park trees provides a stark contrast to the fantastical figures moving between them. She gestures toward the diverse groups, remarking on how wonderful it is that everyone is free to portray the characters they love most, regardless of the genre or style. His gaze drifts across the various participants, spotting everything from armored tokusatsu heroes to iconic heroines from popular anime series, all mingling together in the open air. Suddenly, a peculiar sight catches his eye. A figure in a formal suit topped with a large, cartoonish frog head, standing perfectly still while holding a tray as if waiting for an order in the middle of the food court. The absurdity of the costume proves too much for him to handle, and he breaks into a fit of laughter while instinctively raising his phone to snap a quick photo of the bizarre scene. She immediately interjects, warning him that taking photos without explicit permission is a serious breach of etiquette. She explains that while some events are more relaxed, this one is a social gathering where rules must be strictly followed to respect the cosplayers. Taking her words to heart, he begins to treat the event's regulations like a complex game manual, deciding that he needs to study the map and the rules as if they were a strategy guide to avoid any further blunders. He watches as she presents her smartphone with a triumphant grin, pointing out a digital bulletin that serves as a real-time strategy guide for the event. The screen displays a social media space where cosplayers upload their current photos and locations, creating a digital map for the physical gathering. As they walk through the crowd, she explains the nuances of these posts, noting that some are for friends while others are open invitations for unedited photography, urging him to keep up. With a sudden exclamation, she spots their targets, explaining how she cross-referenced various tweets and search results to pinpoint their exact location. Before them stand three women perfectly costumed as the android Lime B, a sight that leaves him momentarily stunned by the reality of such an encounter. His heart begins to race, the rhythmic thumping audible only to him as he stares at the ground, paralyzed by the proximity of the performers. Noticing his hesitation, she teases him, questioning if he is the sort of fan who simply freezes in the presence of an idol, though he quickly retorts that his nerves stem from a simple lack of experience. She decides to take charge, initiating a 5-second countdown to force him into action, while he silently reflects on the fact that she is the only girl he has truly interacted with in a long time. When the countdown ends, he manages only a strangled, unintelligible sound, prompting her to bypass his hesitation entirely by calling out to the cosplayers herself. She scolds him for his sluggishness and suspicious behavior, explaining that she had to intervene to save the moment, leaving him to grumble in embarrassed silence. He tentatively approaches the trio, his voice slightly shaky as he asks if he might take a few photographs, explaining his recent obsession with the Lime B series. The group of cosplayers, all dressed in the signature futuristic attire of the android, welcome him warmly. Because of their welcoming nature, the tension in his shoulders begins to dissipate as they encourage him to take as many shots as he likes, assuring him that they don't mind at all. Moments later, one of the women draws her prop katana and shifts into a dynamic combat stance, her twin tails fluttering as she prepares for the shot. He is struck by how genuinely kind and professional they are. As he frames the shot through his screen, he can't help but marvel at her dedication, noting that she has perfectly captured the character's iconic posture. His eyes widen as he notices the finer details of their craft. The accessories aren't just plastic, but appear to be made of actual metal, and their physical resemblance to the digital character is uncanny, from their expressions to their very silhouettes. The three of them then come together, forming a cohesive unit that looks like a scene pulled directly from the game's world, their poses synchronized and sharp. After the shutter clicks, he stares at the resulting image in awe, a wide smile breaking across his face as he realizes he's captured something truly special. Seeing his reaction, the cosplayers gather around, eagerly asking to see the results and specifically inquiring if they managed to recreate a certain difficult stance correctly. He assures them with a nod that the pose looks completely natural and impressive. This shared passion leads to a spirited discussion about the game's lore, specifically a poignant clone event that moved them all to tears, and they find common ground in their deep appreciation for the story's emotional beats. However, as the conversation begins to settle, he looks around and a sudden realization hits him. In the excitement of the moment, he has completely lost track of his companion. He watches as the group of friends erupts into a playful but loud argument. One of the girls, clutching her bag, shouts in disbelief about a character named Lapis Lazuli, while another questions why she's siding with the visitors. The chaos of the event seems to have brought out their competitive spirits. The bickering intensifies as they trade barbs about their social media accounts and even their physical appearances. One girl bluntly points out that her friend seems to have gained a bit of weight since their last meeting, prompting an indignant growl from the accused. This sudden bluntness catches him off guard, his eyes widening in shock at the sheer honesty of their exchange. The exclamation of surprise hangs in the air as the girls continue their lively, unfiltered banter. They transition seamlessly into discussing the minute details of their bodies, from slight weight gains to changes in their measurements. He stands nearby, feeling a wave of awkwardness wash over him as he listens to the candid conversation, his gaze drifting toward the bustling crowd. Amidst the chatter, she finds herself lost in thought, a soft blush creeping onto her cheeks. A newfound sense of purpose swells within her, her motivation for cosplaying reaching new heights as she realizes she owes a debt of gratitude to him for this experience. He takes a moment to breathe, stretching his arms high above his head to ease the tension of the day. The constant movement and noise of the convention are beginning to take their toll, but a sense of accomplishment lingers. As he navigates through the throng of people, he begins planning the rest of his evening. He decides he will reach out to her later, perhaps after stopping by the market to pick up supplies for dinner, noting with a small smile that she finally seems to be having a good time. His thoughts are suddenly interrupted by a thunderous roar from the main stage. The sound of a blade being unsheathed rings out, drawing the attention of everyone in the vicinity. He turns to see a stunningly accurate portrayal of the android Lime Bee standing under the spotlights. The sight reignites his passion, and he quickly raises his device to capture the moment, his excitement mirroring the cheering crowd around him. A figure strides across the dark stage, their dark shoes clicking against the surface as they move through the pool of light cast by an overhead spot. A festive greeting of Merry Christmas marks the holiday season, signaling a transition in the event's program. The day had been a whirlwind of vibrant costumes and dedicated fans, with countless cosplayers showcasing their craft across the event floor. Among the crowd, one particular ensemble stood out for its incredible attention to detail, from the precise styling of the hair to the meticulously crafted accessories that seemed to leap straight from a screen. As the master of ceremonies stepped to the microphone to invite the next participant forward, a young man in the audience felt a sudden, sharp intake of breath at the sight of the approaching figure. She stepped into the light, a breathtakingly accurate manifestation of the character Lime-chan, her presence so commanding and realistic that it defied comparison. He found himself momentarily paralyzed, his eyes darting away in a mix of admiration and bashfulness as he noted how her athletic physique perfectly embodied the 2D in reality slogan of the event. Quickly checking his phone, he compared the live image to a screenshot from the game, realizing with a start that the two were virtually identical in every aspect. A deep flush colored his cheeks as the sheer quality of the performance washed over him, leaving him barely able to whisper his amazement at the spectacle unfolding before him. Suddenly, the cosplayer's intense gaze shifted, her eyes narrowing as she stared directly into the sea of spectators. The young man froze, his heart hammering against his ribs as he grappled with the impossible thought that her piercing eyes were locked onto his own. While the surrounding crowd erupted in cheers and pleas for her attention, he felt a wave of embarrassment wash over him when a nearby observer scoffed at the idea that she had even noticed his presence. He stood there, beads of sweat forming on his brow as he tried to shake off the intrusive thoughts that had momentarily clouded his judgment. The realization of how close he had come to a misunderstanding sent a shiver of unease through him. Spotting a familiar figure in the bustling crowd, he approached her with a sense of relief, noting that he had correctly guessed she would be near the stage rather than wandering off alone. She turned to face him, her casual attire a sharp contrast to the elaborate costumes surrounding them. He began to explain his sudden change of heart, admitting that the spectacle had actually piqued his interest in the world of cosplay. She listened with a neutral expression, though a hint of skepticism seemed to linger in her gaze as she processed his newfound enthusiasm. The conversation shifted as he specifically mentioned the girl who had gone by the name Peridot, pointing back toward the stage to clarify exactly who had caught his attention. He noted that the performer had been incredibly precise in her portrayal. As he continued to praise the other girl's dedication to the Lime 8 character, her expression shifted into a comical grimace of annoyance, her cheeks puffing out in a silent display of frustration. She seemed less than impressed by his sudden fixation on the performer. Confused by her sudden and bizarre facial contortion, he could only stare in bewilderment, wondering what could have possibly triggered such a reaction from his friend. Before he could press for an explanation, she abruptly cut him off with a loud declaration of her hunger, her frustration manifesting as a demand for immediate sustenance. He could only offer a weary sigh in response to her sudden shift in priorities. Without waiting for him to agree, she turned on her heel and began marching away through the crowd, leaving him to scramble after her as he called out for her to wait. As he hurried to keep up, a fleeting memory of the cosplayer's radiant smile flashed through his mind, but it was quickly replaced by the reality of chasing his friend through the dense throng of eventgoers. Their frantic pace eventually led them to the entrance of a brightly lit restaurant, the promise of a meal finally bringing a halt to their chaotic trek through the convention grounds. She savors a succulent piece of grilled meat, her eyes closed in momentary bliss as the savory aromas of the yakiniku restaurant surround them. Across the table, the young man questions the choice of venue, but his companion quickly shuts him down, asserting that a hearty meal is the only logical conclusion to a long event day. She bristles when he points out that she isn't dining alone, her sharp retort cutting through his confusion as she insists that post-event yakiniku is a standard tradition. He sighs, finding the situation somewhat depressing as he taps away at the digital ordering tablet to supplement their meal. Observing her across the grill, he notes with concern that she has limited herself strictly to beef tongue and Korean seaweed for the duration of the dinner so far. When the waitress arrives with a fresh tray of ingredients, he offers a polite word of thanks while his companion stares in disbelief at the sheer volume of food. He reassures her that the additional dishes are intended for both of them to share, despite her initial shock at the spread. Taking charge of the grill, he begins a meticulous preparation process, explaining his plan to combine karaage salad with perfectly grilled tripe to create a specific contrast in texture. She watches, bewildered by his sudden culinary intensity and the specific instructions he provides for the meal. His gaze remains fixed on the task at hand, his eyes narrowing with the focus of a man who knows exactly what he is trying to achieve. He continues the demonstration with practiced ease, dipping pot-pickled kalbi into a bowl of raw egg before pouring the rich mixture over a bed of white rice and topping it with crumbled seaweed to complete the dish. With a flourish, he presents the completed creation, his special egg and rice, and urges her to try a bite of everything together. She looks down at the steaming bowl, her expression a mix of hesitation and genuine curiosity at the unusual combination. She initially resists, crossing her arms and insisting that she only ever eats tongue at yakiniku, but he counters by suggesting that a proper meal will help her reach her fitness goals and soothe her frayed nerves. His gentle persistence causes a faint blush to creep onto her cheeks as she finally considers taking a bite. Finally relenting, she takes a bite and is immediately overcome by the richness of the dish, her eyes widening in delight as she admits that the flavor is far beyond anything she expected. She leans back, satisfied and full, while he jokingly threatens to share the secret of the dish with everyone. As he continues to expertly flip the meat on the grill, he probes further, questioning if her earlier sour mood was due to a dislike for the cosplayer Peridot. The question catches her off guard, leaving her visibly confused as he notes how strangely she had been acting. Finally, she confesses the raw truth. Her behavior was driven by jealousy, a revelation that leaves him stunned and speechless. He can hardly process the word, his mind racing as the weight of her admission sinks in. She elaborates, explaining her fear that he was constantly comparing her to the popular cosplayer. But he quickly counters, clarifying that his admiration for Peridot is based on her professional quality and neighborhood fame. A bead of sweat rolls down his face as he tries to find the right words to navigate the sudden emotional intensity. He clarifies his stance, stating that his interest was purely focused on her identity as Lime B, which seems to ease the tension of the comparison. The atmosphere settles into a more comfortable rhythm as they return to their meal, the air between them cleared of the previous misunderstanding. He confidently claims to understand the nuances of that person's behavior, prompting her to rest her chin on her hand and watch him with a playful, knowing expression. She leans in, holding her smartphone out to show him a photo. She explains that the cosplayer is renowned for her bodybuilding, a core part of her identity that allows her to inhabit her roles so effectively. He stares at the screen in disbelief, his voice rising as he asks if the powerful figure in the image is truly Peridot. In response, she scrolls through more images, pointing out a muscular abs-witch costume and a sleek outfit from Spy Sisters. She emphasizes that these varied looks, from powerful to slender, were achieved through physical discipline without any digital filters. The realization hits him hard, causing a bead of sweat to roll down his cheek as he struggles to comprehend that all these distinct personas belong to the same woman. She continues her lecture, explaining that while anyone can wear a costume, the true art of cosplay lies in the silhouette and the physical preparation. She notes that Peridot's unique ability to transform her body is what sets her apart from the rest of the community. Her expression softens with genuine respect as she confesses how much she truly admires the dedication required for such a feat. Shifting her focus slightly, she mentions a specific interview that delves deeper into the cosplayer's rigorous process. The article on the screen features Peridot in a school uniform, answering a question about her secret for preparing her body specifically for each new season's character. He draws a parallel to Hollywood actresses who undergo intense physical transformations for their roles, an observation she confirms by stating that one must truly become the character to succeed at this level. As he washes his hands, he reflects on her words, realizing that he shares a similar, disciplined approach to his own passions and challenges. He scrolls through the digital article, his eyes catching the bold headlines about Peridot's daily hack and a miraculous one-week body transformation. The screen promises to reveal the lifestyle changes that allow for such efficient physical shifts, hinting at a level of discipline that borders on the obsessive. Suddenly, he lunges forward, his hand clamping down on the device and startling the young woman beside him. She lets out a small, confused yelp as he takes control of the screen, his movements driven by a sudden, sharp intuition. He stares at the display, a spark of intense realization lighting up his eyes as the pieces finally click into place. Despite her protests and frantic attempts to pull the phone away, he remains fixated on the data, his mind processing a connection he hadn't seen before. She becomes increasingly flustered, her face flushing as she begs him to stop looking at the private records. The screen is filled with meticulous logs of mental maintenance, weight fluctuations, and strict dietary and exercise routines, all perfectly recorded alongside images of her sister's own habits. He ignores her pleas, his breath hitching as he mutters for her to wait, while his mind races through the implications. A bead of sweat rolls down his cheek, his expression one of manic discovery as he nears the truth. The young man finally sees the full picture, a detailed photo of a sculpted physique used as a reference for the transformation. He realizes with a shock that he isn't just looking at an interview, but a comprehensive, self-documented body sculpting wiki guide that reveals the secret behind Peridot's form. Ruri sprints through the quiet neighborhood streets, her breath hitching as she pushes herself toward home. She bursts through the gate, calling out her return, but her arrival seems to go unnoticed by the silent houses. She finally reaches the door, only to be met by a stern reminder from the woman inside to keep her voice down during the late hours. The mention of her companion's name hangs in the air as she steps into the light. She steps further into the warmth of the home, offering a polite greeting to the older woman, who looks up from her tasks with a welcoming smile. Her pale complexion immediately draws a look of concern from the woman. Internally, the young athlete struggles. The heavy meal she just consumed weighing like lead in her stomach as she tries to maintain her composure. The older woman mentions that her son had spoken of their shared meal, offering a remedy or some tea to soothe the girl's obvious distress. The athlete can barely focus, her mind and body occupied by the physical toll of her recent indulgence. Upstairs, the young man sits at his desk, his brow furrowed in deep thought. He reflects on the recent changes in his friend's behavior, realizing that his passive support of her intense regimen might be doing more harm than good, especially considering her erratic sleeping habits. He remains engrossed in his research, scouring the internet for information on body sculpting and healthy weight gain, frustrated by his own ignorance on the subject. Unbeknownst to him, the girl has arrived at his door, watching him with a mix of curiosity and exhaustion. He continues to type frantically, his fingers flying across the keyboard as he tries to piece together a better plan for her. The quiet intensity of the moment is broken when a third figure appears in the hallway, peering over the girl's shoulder and questioning the nature of their late-night meeting. She watches as he spins around in his chair, his frustration boiling over as he scolds the girl for her reckless running, warning her that such exertion will only hinder her goals. She fires back with a sharp retort, their usual bickering resuming under the watchful eye of her sister. He leans toward his computer screen, a mischievous glint in his eyes as he proposes a radical idea, adopting the lifestyle of her idol, Peridot. Ruri pauses, her expression a mix of curiosity and hesitation, considering the efficiency of such a plan. Because of her interest, he immediately begins drafting a rigorous schedule, questioning her about her college commitments. She provides the details, noting her early wake-up time and the blocks of free time scattered throughout her week. As the planning intensifies, he bombards her with a relentless stream of inquiries, ranging from her sleep habits and favorite foods to her weight fluctuations over the past year. He scribbles notes frantically, determined to leave no detail unexamined. The young man lets out a low, confident chuckle, his eyes fixed on the screen as he mentions starting a training simulation that involves an absurd amount of donuts. Behind him, Ruri watches with a look of growing concern, wondering what kind of bizarre regimen he is actually concocting for her. In response to her skepticism, he shifts gears, suggesting they search for a new recipe together. The sudden change in direction catches her off guard, her eyes widening in surprise. Moments later, the screen is cluttered with a dizzying array of open browser tabs, each one dedicated to different aspects of nutrition, weight management, and specific food items like tofu and hamburgers. Staring at the screen, she realizes with a start that these tabs represent everything they had eaten together recently. The sheer volume of research he has conducted is overwhelming. She turns her head away, a soft blush creeping onto her cheeks as the realization sinks in. He had been working on this meticulously, even during the moments she thought he wasn't paying attention. That night, the two remain in their respective homes, separated by distance but connected by the project. He continues to toil at his desk under the glow of his monitor, while she sits quietly, reflecting on the effort he is putting in for her sake. Finally, as the morning light begins to touch the city, the long hours of preparation culminate in a single, triumphant declaration. The plan is complete. Shinchan sits at his desk, reviewing the 2-week schedule he has meticulously prepared to help manage the upcoming days. Glancing at the clock, he is startled to see it is already 6:30 in the morning, and looking out the window, he spots a familiar figure already active. He calls out to Ruri, asking if she is already awake, to which she looks up, startled, and explains she is just taking a short break from her work. She proudly presents her latest creation, a stunning, intricate costume for the character Katlia, displayed on a mannequin in her room. Holding up her phone, she shows him the reference image, eager to see his reaction to how closely she matched the design. He is genuinely amazed, especially when she reveals she crafted it before the second game's release, filling in the unknown details with her own creative vision and imagination. When he asks if there is more to come, she beams with passion, declaring her intent to finish every remaining detail piece by piece because of her deep love for the craft. Her eyes reflect a fierce, almost obsessive dedication to her art, showing the intensity of her focus. He gently cautions her, pointing out the bandages on her fingers and reminding her that even the most intense passion requires a sense of balance to avoid self-harm. Suddenly, the exhaustion catches up to her, and she stumbles from a bout of anemia caused by staying awake too long, prompting him to warn her to control her impulses. She collapses suddenly, her strength failing as she slumps into his arms. He catches her just in time, his voice filled with alarm as he calls out her name, his hands steadying her trembling form. He immediately recoils, stammering an apology and checking on her well-being, but his accidental proximity triggers a sharp reaction. Flustered and defensive, she lashes out with embarrassed insults, calling him an idiot and a pervert despite his clear concern. She tries to regain her composure, breathlessly acknowledging that he did help her, even if the situation was awkward. He shifts the focus, pointing toward a nearby display and questioning if the sizing is correct, noting that time is running short. The conversation turns to a previous costume displayed on a mannequin, a complex garment that represents a past challenge. She explains that for the character's second version, the official design requires a specific, more developed physique to be truly accurate. Looking at the calendar, she realizes there is only a month left before the next big event, fueling her intense desire for redemption. She explains her plan to transform her body to match the character's fully developed form, fearing the gossip of others if she fails to meet her own high standards. She suddenly grabs his shirt, her eyes burning with a desperate intensity as she frames her request as an urgent, limited-time quest. She insists that they must work together to achieve her physical goal before the deadline, leaving him stunned by her sudden burst of energy and the sheer scale of the task she is demanding of him. The two of them sit on the floor of the apartment, the air thick with a sudden, heavy tension. Ruri drops a bombshell. She has a strict 1-month time limit to increase her bust size to a C-cup for her next appearance. Nakasu is visibly rattled, his face contorted in shock as he processes the sheer absurdity of such a deadline. He follows up by asking for her current status to gauge the scale of the task. She hesitates, blushing deeply and looking away, before whispering that she is currently a B-cup. Because the difference seems minor to him, he questions if she isn't exaggerating the difficulty. She snaps back instantly, her expression a mix of embarrassment and fervor as she pleads for him to understand a maiden's desire to maintain her appearance and the importance of those small details. His gaze drifts toward the peridot costume displayed on a nearby mannequin as he voices his logical doubts. He wonders aloud if such a physical transformation is even biologically possible in such a short window, especially given the precision required for the outfit. He remains unconvinced, his expression shifting to one of awkward uncertainty. He admits that, honestly, he isn't sure they can pull off such a feat, his confidence wavering under the pressure of the impossible goal. To support his skepticism, he points out that the training roadmap he has been meticulously following for her character is designed for long-term bodybuilding and overall physique. He explains that the program doesn't specialize in the kind of short-term, localized solutions she is asking for. Despite his logical arguments, she is completely undeterred. She declares that the quest has already begun, her eyes burning with a fierce, competitive fire as she explains that she actually gets more fired up when faced with restrictions and difficult odds. She is swept off her feet as he insists that rest is mandatory to fix her sleep-deprived state, lifting her with surprising ease. Despite her protests and claims that she can walk back to her own room, he remains firm in his insistence, carrying her through the hallway. He offers a reassuring smile, dismissing her embarrassment by pointing out that her physical exhaustion is plain to see and that there is no need for pride now. Upon entering her sanctuary, however, the atmosphere shifts instantly as he is confronted by a chaotic sea of discarded items, trash, and clutter that fills every corner of the room. She lashes out in embarrassment, calling him an idiot for seeing the mess, while he stands frozen, trying to process the sheer scale of the disarray before him. He bluntly questions if she truly lives in such a dumpster room, prompting her to defensively claim that the mess is merely the remnants of a single night's dinner. As he begins to clear the debris, she recoils in a panic, accusing him of being a pervert for handling her personal effects without permission. He points out the logistical impossibility of the space, noting there is barely a square inch of floor visible to stand on, let alone sleep. She attempts to rationalize the chaos, claiming a strange sense of comfort in having everything within arm's reach, though he remains entirely unconvinced by her logic. Determined to improve her living conditions for the sake of her health, he begins a thorough cleaning, only to inadvertently stumble upon a delicate piece of cosplay attire that sends her into a fresh wave of panic. He stands his ground as she lashes out, her frustration boiling over at his intrusion into her messy sanctuary. She declares him the absolute worst for his relentless cleaning, but he remains unfazed by her outburst, focused on the task at hand. Continuing his cleanup, he picks up a discarded item, questioning its strange color and texture. She immediately panics, shrieking for him to stop and explaining that it is a precious memento from a 10th anniversary event, while he remains convinced it is merely more clutter that needs to be tossed. After hours of grueling labor, the two of them finally collapse, the clock on a nearby phone revealing it is already mid-afternoon. He lets out a heavy, weary sigh, reflecting on the sheer physical and mental exhaustion of the day's monumental task. He looks over at her, firmly stating that if she cannot maintain the space herself, he will have to return regularly to do it for her. She groans in response, complaining that his nagging makes him sound exactly like her mother, while he laments the half-day they lost just trying to find the floor. She finally hits her limit, face-planting into the bed with a muffled cry of total exhaustion. While she desperately wants to sleep, the pangs of hunger compete with her fatigue, a sentiment he shares as he stifles a yawn and considers their next move. Realizing that sleeping now would leave no time to prepare a meal for her later, he decides to push through his own tiredness. He knows that if he doesn't prepare something now, she will have nothing to eat when she eventually wakes up from her much-needed rest. He watches her for a moment as she drifts into a deep, peaceful slumber, her earlier anger completely vanished in the face of sleep. A wave of appreciation for the silent efforts of parents washes over him, and he offers a quiet, internal thanks to his own mother for the countless meals she provided without complaint. Donning an apron, he turns his attention to the kitchen, determined to establish a roadmap for her nutritional goals while keeping the space orderly. He scans the area, his mind already settling on a specific menu designed to help her reach her fitness targets and maintain her physique. However, his culinary ambitions are cut short when he opens the storage to find it completely bare. He stares blankly at the empty shelves, realizing with a sinking feeling that there isn't a single ingredient available to cook with. He rubs his eyes, the weight of the weekend's upcoming cosplay event adding to his current predicament. Because he had been so busy assisting her with her preparations and being dragged along to events, he never had the chance to go grocery shopping. leaving them both stranded without food. He is standing in the kitchen when his mother suddenly returns home, announcing her arrival with a cheerful call. She explains that she has just come back from his grandfather's house, where she was providing care due to his age, and finds herself free for the day. As she pulls him into a tight, affectionate embrace, she chatteringly recounts how much his grandfather adores her, even mentioning his plans to move closer. He notes with a hint of amusement that she always returns from these visits with a strange, regional accent, a quirk he's observed several times before. Breaking the embrace slightly, she pauses to look him over, her eyes landing on the garment he's wearing. She curiously points out that he is wearing an apron, a detail that hadn't escaped her notice. This observation leads to immediate teasing, as she playfully asks if he's preparing a meal for Ruri-chan, praising him for being so reliable. He becomes visibly flustered, his face reddening as he loudly tells her to shut up, though his protest does little to dampen her spirits. Despite the teasing, he eventually admits the reality of his situation, confessing that the kitchen is empty and he lacks the necessary ingredients to actually prepare anything. Hearing this, she produces a large bag filled with various groceries, presenting them with a flourish. She chides him gently, wondering why he hadn't mentioned the lack of food earlier. She continues to observe the state of the household, noting that it clearly hasn't seen a proper shopping trip in quite some time. Relieved by the sudden windfall of supplies, he offers a sincere thank you. She responds with a knowing smile, asking if there's anything specific from the haul he plans to use for his cooking. She then offers some unsolicited romantic advice, suggesting that the way to a girl's heart is through her stomach, just as she did with his father. He tries to dismiss the comparison, insisting his care for Ruri isn't like that, while simultaneously checking the clock and realizing how late it has become. As he prepares to get to work, she leaves him with a final piece of motherly advice, to be kind to Ruri-chan and avoid any unnecessary arguments. He stands there, apron on, ready to face the culinary challenge ahead. While he sleeps, the night remains still, the full moon hanging high in a star-dusted sky above the quiet rooftops. The exhausted youth has drifted into a deep slumber while still clutching his smartphone, unaware that across the distance, she remains awake, perched by her window, and staring at her own screen with a thoughtful expression. On her table, a carefully placed note rests beside a covered dish, explaining that he prepared a meal for whenever she woke up and felt the pangs of hunger. She had been struggling lately, feeling the weight of anemia and dizziness, and her research suggested a poor intestinal microbiome might be the culprit behind her recent malaise. With a gentle tug, she removes the covering, revealing the meal he specifically designed to address her health concerns. Lifting her chopsticks, she finds the bowl brimming with a vibrant assortment of ingredients chosen for their high dietary fiber, and she wastes no time in tasting the first morsel. Her eyes widen in surprise as the flavors hit her palate, the perfect balance of salty and sweet bringing an immediate glow to her face. As she continues to eat, she notes the distinct, rich flavor of the Kyushu soy sauce, a specialty from his mother's hometown, which enhances the natural taste of the other ingredients without overpowering them. She feels every bite restoring her, as the high fiber content works to improve her internal health and boost her body's nutritional efficiency. A sense of pure contentment washes over her, leaving her feeling revitalized and hopeful that such nutrition might even aid her physical growth. As she finally settles in for the night, he remains fast asleep, their silent connection through the meal bringing the long day to a peaceful close. She had been the focus of his care, but now the exhaustion of his efforts finally catches up to him. He lets out a long, weary yawn, his hand barely covering his mouth as his eyes squeeze shut from fatigue. Despite sleeping until the morning, the early lesson feels like a heavy weight. He sits slumped in the lecture hall, surrounded by other students, his eyelids drooping as the professor's voice drones on in the background. He recalls waking up at sunrise to find that Ruri had already finished the meal he prepared, leaving behind a simple note of thanks. Back in the present, the reality of the upcoming exams hits him as a classmate warns that this material will be on the test, threatening to fail anyone who isn't paying attention. He rubs the back of his neck, feeling the persistent ache of fatigue deep in his muscles. He acknowledges that he pushed himself to the limit after being fired, but now he must find a way to manage his time and energy before he collapses under the weight of these new constraints. He eventually gives in to the exhaustion, resting his head on the desk for a brief moment of respite. His friend, Yudo, tries to shake him awake, reminding him that his health is a valuable asset, but he simply mutters a sleepy request for Yudo to take over the lecture notes for him. While he drifts in and out of sleep, he becomes the subject of unwanted attention. A girl sitting nearby stares intently in his direction, her gaze sharp and unyielding. Yudo notices the scrutiny and nudges him, pointing out that she hasn't looked away, but he is too tired to care, suggesting they just discuss it later. She stands directly before him, her expression a mix of sternness and hidden intent, marked by a distinctive star-shaped clip in her dark hair. He looks up, startled and confused by her sudden presence, offering a hesitant apology as she looms over him with an aura that suggests trouble is brewing. A striking figure commands attention, her presence almost overwhelming as she leans forward, a star-shaped clip glinting in her dark hair. In a small corner of the world, Shin can only stare in stunned silence, his eyes meeting hers in a moment of unexpected impact. He recoils, his face contorting into a mask of pure shock that leaves his companion, Yudo, visibly unsettled. Yudo can't help but comment on the sheer intensity of the expression, finding it genuinely unnerving. They sit together in the quiet hum of the lecture hall, where Yudo continues to chide him for his lack of tact. He warns Shin that such bluntness is rude, especially if the subject of their conversation were to overhear. He remains defiant, arguing that one shouldn't conflate lofty ideals with the messy reality of life, though Yudo remains skeptical of his specific tastes. The debate shifts toward the merits of silhouettes, with Shin dismissing the notion as mere fantasy. As they settle into a more serious tone, Yudo leans in, his curiosity piqued by the mysterious girl who has become the center of their discussion. He asks point-blank if she is a friend, advising Shin to keep his distance if he wants to avoid unnecessary complications. The girl in question sits nearby, her back turned to reveal an intricate rabbit design on her traditional attire, a silent presence in their shared classroom. Shin is caught off guard by the revelation that they are actually classmates, a fact he seems to have completely overlooked. He struggles to reconcile this information, insisting that he has no memory of such a person. Yudo counters that perhaps his memory is simply failing him, or more likely, he hasn't been paying attention to how much she has changed since they first met. The conversation drifts back to the beginning of the spring term, a time when a certain girl stood out for her refined and elegant demeanor. She was the talk of the campus, a figure of grace that drew everyone's eyes. Despite her popularity, she remained an enigma, politely declining every invitation to lunch or karaoke until the persistent crowd eventually gave up. As the pieces finally click into place, Shin experiences a sudden jolt of recognition, realizing he does indeed remember the girl from those early days. He recalls the rapid transformations that followed her initial appearance. Within a single week, her hair had shifted to a vibrant green, and only 5 days after that, she arrived in class as a complete blonde, leaving the rest of the students in a state of perpetual shock. As the novelty of her changing looks wore off, the whispers in the lecture hall turned to boredom. Yudo noted that most people eventually lost interest in her, dismissing her simply as a strange girl who was perhaps trying too hard to stand out from the crowd. His gaze lingered on her as others pointed out her more peculiar choices, such as the absence of eyebrows, which only added to her enigmatic and slightly unsettling aura during those long hours of study. The silence of his recollection was shattered when she suddenly appeared before them in the present, a radiant smile on her face. Introducing herself as Midori, she boldly asked if they could be friends, catching both him and Yudo completely off guard with her directness. This unexpected approach sent a ripple of disbelief through the surrounding students, who began to question what her true goal could possibly be in seeking out someone as unremarkable as him. Later that day, the bright afternoon sun bathed the campus grounds in a warm, deceptive glow of normalcy. The quiet was short-lived, however, as she sat down on a bench so close to him that their shoulders brushed, causing him to stiffen in surprise at the sudden lack of personal space. He found himself paralyzed as she leaned in even further, her presence overwhelming his senses while he internally grappled with the sheer absurdity of the situation. The proximity did not go unnoticed by those passing by, whose hushed comments about them being a couple only heightened his growing sense of unease and embarrassment. They wondered aloud if a beauty like her could really be with someone like him, making the atmosphere even more stifling. Every movement she made seemed calculated to draw him closer, and as she leaned forward, he became acutely and uncomfortably aware of just how intimate their new friendship had become in a matter of minutes. He is paralyzed by the sudden, overwhelming proximity, his heart racing as Midori clings to his arm with a strength that belies her slender frame. She teases him, noting that she can hear his frantic thoughts from this distance, while he struggles to process why she has chosen to bridge the social gap so aggressively. He watches as a brief, heavy silence settles between them on the bench, until she suddenly perks up as if struck by a forgotten chore. He watches as she pulls out a cosmetic pen and begins sketching dark, sharp lines above her eyes, casually remarking that she had completely neglected to draw her eyebrows earlier that day. She holds up her smartphone, declaring that such a momentous meeting deserves a commemorative photograph. She leans in even closer, flashing a bright smile for the lens while Shin remains stiff and bewildered by her unrestrained energy. She mentions her idol with a fervor that borders on obsession, her excitement radiating through the screen of the device. She presents a small acrylic stand of her favorite character, prompting him to realize that her eccentricities go far beyond her physical appearance. It is her unpredictable, wild behavior that truly sets her apart. He tentatively asks if she would find common ground if he were to emulate the style of the character she admires so much. This suggestion ignites a spark of pure joy in her eyes, and she leans forward, eager to discuss the intricacies of her favorite figure. She assumes that he must share her deep-seated passion for the character, her voice rising with anticipation. She is taken aback when he reveals his extensive knowledge of the game, detailing how he has cleared every sub-event and mastered the mechanics through multiple playthroughs. Her expression shifts to one of genuine awe, impressed by his dedication to the digital world they both inhabit. They soon find themselves side by side, eyes glued to their respective screens as they tackle a difficult boss encounter that has left her frustrated and stuck. They continue the raid, and the seasoned player offers a tactical suggestion, advising her to swap her light equipment for heavy gear to counter the boss's high durability. She listens intently, and the two of them finally find a rhythm in their shared digital struggle. He watches as she becomes intensely focused, her eyes narrowing as she insists that a specific costume is her favorite, her passion for the digital idol bordering on obsession. Because of her intensity, he suggests a tactical approach, recommending enhancement items and ally buffs to optimize the character's performance, though her frighteningly serious expression makes him hesitate. As they sit together on the park bench, he explains the hidden mechanics of the game, noting that the specific skill combination will multiply the attack power by 15 due to a hidden factor. Moments later, the strategy pays off with a devastating instant kill that secures their victory, leaving her in absolute awe of the sudden power spike. In response to the win, she erupts in joy, high-fiving him before pulling him into a sudden, crushing hug that catches him completely off guard, her excitement overriding any sense of personal space. The physical contact leaves him breathless and reeling, his mind racing as he struggles to process the unexpected intimacy and the overwhelming sensation of the moment. While she eagerly suggests the next quest with a bright, close-up smile, he finds himself distracted by her proximity, realizing that her sense of personal distance is fundamentally different from his own. After the excitement settles, she pulls out a massive 2-liter water bottle and begins to chug it, explaining that she developed the habit of drinking large amounts to temporarily expand her waistline for specific cosplay silhouettes. When he steps away to find a vending machine, his eyes fall upon a promotional flyer for the Ikebukuro cosplay event, and the realization finally hits him as he connects her habits to the girl he saw before. The image of the mysterious cosplayer from the event flashes through his mind, and he finally confirms the truth. The girl standing before him and the stunning performer from the festival are one and the same. He stands frozen, the realization hitting him like a physical blow as he stares at the familiar silhouette before him. Stuttering, he asks if she had seen him at the stage, to which she calmly reveals that his enthusiastic photography of her form was exactly why she sought him out today. The two stand in the quiet park, the wind rustling the trees as a heavy silence settles between them following her blunt admission. Within his mind, the pieces of the puzzle finally lock into place. He recalls the frequent hairstyle changes, the sharp intensity of her gaze from her groomed eyebrows, and her habit of taking selfies, all hallmarks of a dedicated cosplayer that he had previously overlooked. As he continues to study her, the physical similarities become undeniable, confirming his suspicion that her physique is a perfect match for the performer he saw on stage. She catches him staring and, with a mischievous glint in her eyes, teases him for his lingering gaze, even going so far as to offer a scandalous permission that leaves him sputtering in embarrassment. Driven by a sudden burst of resolve, he reaches out and firmly grasps her arm, his mind racing with a new plan. He boldly proposes they hold a drinking party, his face flushed with a mix of excitement and desperation. She, however, is less than impressed, pulling back slightly and chiding him for being far too forward. Realizing he needs a more tactical approach to bridge the gap, he decides to take the initiative by mentioning a childhood friend who is also a cosplayer. He asks if she would be willing to share her secrets for enhancing one's figure, claiming his friend deeply admires her work. She pauses, the word cosplayer hanging in the air as she looks at him with a mixture of curiosity and skepticism. He reasons that hearing the truth directly from a professional might be the only way to convince his friend to abandon her more extreme methods. He struggles internally, trying to find the right words to bridge the gap between his two worlds. Watching her clutch a large water bottle, he reflects on the grueling effort she puts into her craft and her finances. He concludes that such hazardous physical changes aren't worth the risk to her health, a sentiment he feels compelled to share. He stares in wide-eyed shock as she thrusts her smartphone toward him, the sudden movement catching him completely off guard. On the screen, a product listing for a realistic silicone bust appears, complete with a high price tag and detailed instructions on how to wear the prosthetic. As he stammers in confusion, she explains that modern technology has provided cosplayers with a variety of useful tools, implying that the extreme physical changes he feared might be achieved through less hazardous means. They stroll through the park, the conversation turning to the practicalities of their craft. She holds up a small container, explaining that silicone breastplates are essential tools for achieving certain looks, effectively bridging the gap between reality and the exaggerated proportions of fictional characters. He stops in his tracks, his eyes widening as the realization hits him. While he had seen muscle suits for sumo or masculine roles, the idea of specialized prosthetics for feminine forms is a revelation that leaves him momentarily stunned. Because of his surprise, she pulls out her phone to provide a visual example, scrolling to a popular cosplayer named Limesad. She explains that since fictional characters often possess proportions that defy human anatomy, these tools are a standard way to ensure a costume looks authentic to the source material. As they lean in to examine the screen, she points out a nearly invisible line where the prosthetic meets the skin. She catches him staring a bit too intently at the details and teases him for his sudden, focused interest in other women. To further his education, she describes the various techniques used to mask the transition, such as strategic clothing choices or specific camera angles that hide the seams and maintain the illusion of a natural physique. She continues, noting that while some purists might criticize the use of such aids, a skilled practitioner can make them indistinguishable from the real thing through clever posing and confidence, regardless of what others might think. This revelation leaves him staring at his own device in a daze. The line between what is natural and what is manufactured has become hopelessly blurred in his mind, making him question everything he sees in the community. He begins to weigh the implications, considering how these prosthetics eliminate the need for dangerous or extreme body modification. The health risks of the latter are significant, making the silicone alternative seem like a logical and much safer choice for achieving a specific aesthetic. Impressed by her deep well of industry knowledge, he watches as she finishes her drink with a satisfied sigh. She has once again provided insights into the world of cosplay that he never would have considered on his own. Moments later, she declares it her cheat day and suggests a trip to a nearby coffee shop for a treat. He can only chuckle at her whims, labeling her a free spirit who does exactly as she pleases without hesitation. She is nowhere to be seen as the next morning arrives, but he is already up, stretching his arms as the sun begins to climb. He soon turns his attention to a digital screen, presenting a video of the famous cosplayer, Peridot-san, to a stunned Ruri. He sits with her in the quiet room, the weight of the revelation hanging heavy as Ruri struggles to process that the star on the screen was once her own classmate. He is startled when she suddenly falters, her strength deserting her as she leans heavily against him. He catches her instantly, his voice laced with urgent concern as he asks if her health is failing again. He watches as, despite her apparent weakness, she manages to plead with the figure on the screen, desperately asking Peridot-san to repeat a specific, embarrassing phrase. He listens as she continues her fervent praise, her voice rising as she confesses how much she admires the quality of the cosplays and admits, with a hint of envy, that the other woman's breasts are impressively large. He remains caught in the middle of the awkward exchange as the woman on the screen takes the compliments in stride, teasingly noting how fans often praise her physique and get nervous in her presence. He eventually finds his voice, cutting through the escalating absurdity to ask the digital visitor the true reason for her unexpected appearance. He watches her expression shift to one of serious intent as she reveals the core of the matter. She has come because someone has been attempting to replicate her specific, and perhaps dangerous, body transformations. He delves deeper into the mystery with her, discussing a figure named Midori who had previously warned others against the perils of imitating such extreme physical changes. He listens intently as she describes the grim reality of those who chase an impossible silhouette, explaining how the pressure to achieve a model-like figure often spirals into the debilitating grip of anorexia. She continues her sobering lecture, noting that the damage isn't merely physical. Many succumb to mental illness when their reality fails to match the perfection they crave, often resulting in a desperate reliance on medication. Leaning closer with a piercing gaze, she questions the logic of such extremes for a mere hobby, pointing out that while professionals might sacrifice their health for fame and fortune, a cosplayer's devotion should have its limits. The weight of her words hangs heavy in the air, leaving him and his companion speechless as she turns her focus to the young woman, asking how she intends to proceed now that the dangers have been laid bare. Suddenly, the somber atmosphere evaporates as she gleefully picks up a game controller, demanding to see his progress and leaving the other woman fuming at the jarring shift in tone. She clarifies that her warning is complete and her current interest lies solely in his gaming achievements, settling into a relaxed posture on the floor while the tension remains thick for the others. While she remains focused on the screen, the others stand in a stunned silence, still reeling from the intensity of the previous revelation and the casual way she dismissed it. He attempts to break the tension by suggesting safer alternatives like silicone enhancements, but his words do little to comfort the silver-haired woman, who remains lost in her own troubled thoughts. A sudden realization dawns on her, her eyes widening as she grapples with a new, perhaps simpler, perspective on the situation that had previously seemed so dire. Seeing her reaction, the dark-haired woman lets out a dismissive laugh, declaring that any attempt at intimidation would be a fruitless endeavor and a waste of time. She remains quiet as the stern advice continues, listening to the argument that one must avoid the impossible to maintain a healthy balance. The warning is clear. Fixating on unattainable physical goals only prevents progress in normal dieting or muscle building, a risk that was understood from the very beginning. The speaker then strikes a confident pose, asserting that the drive for a better physique is a natural desire for any woman, not just a requirement for a costume. This perspective finds common ground among them, sparking a side conversation about a mutual acquaintance's own physical goals and the curiosity surrounding whether her name is actually her first name. They acknowledge that while she already possesses a notable figure, her ambition for more is undeniable. Clearing her throat to bring the focus back, she admits that she possesses her own set of ambitions that fuel her drive. Her gaze lingers on the elaborate outfit nearby as she reveals that this specific persona is the one she has truly set her heart on embodying, a goal she has held since the very start. She further explains that achieving such a transformation requires a level of physical perfection that is only attainable under very specific circumstances, making the ideal body an essential component of the craft. A sudden, knowing whisper from her friend catches her completely off guard, leaving her stunned that her private thoughts were so easily read. The group's attention then turns to a set of character specifications on the screen, where the young man begins to analyze the precise measurements listed for the character, noting the specific 3 sizes with clinical interest. He finds himself bewildered by the sudden shift in the room's energy, unable to pinpoint what caused the change in mood. His attempt to gather more information is met with a sharp, indignant rebuff, leaving him to wonder why his curiosity was deemed so offensive as he is shut down completely. He observes the conversation as Ruri questions Sophia about the imitator, wondering if it is truly wise to let the matter slide without a reprimand. She dismisses the concern entirely, claiming she has no interest in the imitator's actions, which leaves Ruri momentarily stunned by her lack of worry. The blonde woman quickly pivots, noticing the controller in Sophia's hands and suggesting they spend their time more productively by playing a game together. This proposal fills Sophia with genuine excitement as she admits her long-standing curiosity about the cooperative mode and asks to be taught how it works. He realizes with a start that they are about to overwrite his own save data, but he decides to let it go as the two women begin to bond over the console. They are soon completely lost in the digital experience, pointing at the screen and sharing a rare moment of genuine, lighthearted camaraderie. Their immersion is eventually broken by the loud, synchronized growling of their stomachs as the digital clock marks the arrival of the evening hours. The hungry duo immediately demands sustenance, turning their focus toward him and insisting that it is long past time for a meal to be prepared. He produces a set of notes and papers, asking for their specific preferences while already having anticipated this inevitable turn of events. These documents reveal a comprehensive dietary schedule and menu he prepared by cross-referencing their public interviews and fan-run wikis to ensure their needs are met. He watches as she eagerly scans the document, her finger tracing the lines of the meticulously planned menu. She points out specific dishes that catch her eye, her initial skepticism replaced by a genuine appetite as she selects exactly what she wants to eat. Seeing her enthusiasm, he offers a quiet acknowledgement, his sharp eyes reflecting a sense of satisfaction that his research has hit the mark. He turns to leave the room, announcing his intention to begin the preparations immediately. Behind him, the two women remain seated, the atmosphere shifting from the intensity of their game to the quiet anticipation of the coming meal. The door clicks shut behind him with a cheerful parting wish, leaving a stunned silence in his wake. The suddenness of his departure leaves his guests momentarily speechless. Seizing the moment of privacy, she leans in toward her companion with a mischievous glint in her eyes, offering to share a secret technique for physical enhancement. Her sudden boldness leaves the other woman flustered and calling out in vain for their host to return, realizing she is now at the mercy of her rival's playful and provocative teasing. Hands press firmly into the soft, yielding dough, working it with rhythmic precision. Shin stands at the kitchen counter, brow furrowed in concentration as he continues the labor. He reflects on the intensity of shared passions, noting that whether it's gaming or cosplay, people tend to dive in headfirst. He remains blissfully unaware of the chaos in the next room, where Ruri looms over a startled Sophia. Ruri speaks of the necessity of physical guidance and drilling lessons into the body, her hands making firm, unexpected contact with the other woman. The startled woman gasps, her face flushing as she tries to process the sudden, intimate contact. She stammers out a protest, demanding to know what Ruri thinks she is doing in such a bold manner. She is met with a blunt explanation as Ruri clarifies, without a hint of embarrassment, that she is simply performing a massage. Sophia, still reeling from the physical sensation, can only offer a confused and flustered rebuttal. The self-proclaimed teacher shifts the conversation to their history as childhood friends, though Sophia remains skeptical of the relevance. She reminds Ruri that their original plan was to play a game, not to engage in this bizarre physical tutorial. Their exchange is suddenly interrupted by a loud, rumbling growl erupting from Ruri's midsection. She admits that her intense hunger is making it impossible to effectively spread the word of her cause, her stomach's demands finally overriding her desire to proselytize. She admits defeat to her appetite, and the two reach a temporary truce to prioritize a meal. Ruri promises that since the initial enlargement massage was well received, she will continue the lessons in earnest after they have eaten and spent some time gaming. The duo eventually returns their attention to the kitchen, where the sound of a knife rhythmically hitting the cutting board fills the air. Sophia watches Shin work, surprised when he mentions that he already knew about her concerns because of a previous conversation they had shared. A flashback reveals the origin of this arrangement, recalling the moment Sophia stood before Ruri in her undergarments, pleading for help. Driven by a deep-seated desire for a more developed figure, she had begged Ruri to teach her the secrets of her physical maintenance. She stands ready, having shed her outer layers to allow for the promised instruction. Her companion reacts with enthusiastic approval, noting how much simpler the task becomes without the hindrance of heavy clothing. As she settles into position, the other woman moves in close behind her, initiating the first contact. A sharp gasp escapes her lips as the lesson truly begins, while the instructor confirms that this level of undress is indeed optimal for the technique. The contact becomes firm and direct. She winces slightly, feeling the strength in the hands now molding her form with clinical precision. While maintaining her grip, the instructor offers a detailed diagnosis, observing that her slender frame possesses a firmness that might actually be a sign of poor circulation. She is warned that without better nutrition and improved blood flow, her goals for physical change will remain out of reach. This logical explanation rings true to her, even as the physical manipulation continues. The focus shifts to softening the tissue, with the instructor explaining the necessity of specific pinching and rhythmic movements to achieve the desired pliability. The intensity of the massage suddenly spikes, drawing a startled cry from her as she feels herself being handled with unexpected vigor. Despite her protests and the fear that the treatment is too aggressive, the instructor remains calm, urging her to relax and promising that the initial sharp sensations are merely part of the process. The pace shifts again, becoming more deliberate. She is told to focus on the slow, methodical movement starting from the center, as the instructor guides the flow of the massage with unwavering focus. Every motion is now slow and heavy, the pressure constant as the technique is applied with exacting care. The instructor whispers a promise of what is to come, explaining that as her body temperature rises, the initial discomfort will give way to a much more pleasant sensation. She remains flushed, caught between the clinical nature of the lesson and the overwhelming physical intimacy of the moment. The rhythmic cycle begins anew, a repetitive sequence of pressure and release. She can do little more than endure the mounting heat and the strange, evolving sensations as the lesson continues unabated. She remains seated on the floor, her body tensing as the massage continues. Ruri works methodically, her hands moving with practiced precision, eliciting a series of involuntary gasps and sighs from her subject. Because of this intense physical contact, she finds herself unable to deny the sensation, admitting through a flushed face and heavy breathing that the treatment actually feels good. As the session intensifies, the room fills with the sound of her labored breathing while Ruri shifts her focus, applying pressure to different muscle groups with an unwavering clinical focus. Suddenly, a wave of self-consciousness washes over her as she realizes the impropriety of her situation, half-clothed and vulnerable in a young man's bedroom. Her internal panic is interrupted by a cheerful voice calling out from beyond the door, causing both women to freeze in place. While the woman on the stairs announces that dinner is being prepared, she struggles to compose herself, her body still radiating heat from the vigorous massage. In response to the impending arrival, Ruri increases the pace to finish the session, pushing her to the very limit of her endurance until she is left trembling and breathless. Outside, the quiet night air surrounds the house, a stark contrast to the intense physical drama unfolding within the illuminated upstairs room. Moments later, the door opens and he steps into the room, his expression a mix of anticipation and uncertainty after being kept waiting. He stops dead in his tracks at the sight of her sprawled out on the floor, completely spent, while Ruri calmly explains that she was merely providing a necessary lesson to her hopeless friend. He stands there, tray in hand, staring in disbelief as Sophia, still sprawled on the floor, excitedly points out how much softer her muscles have become after the session. The shock of the sight nearly causes him to lose his grip on the food, prompting a frantic cry from the girls to be careful and not drop the meal. Once the initial surprise fades, Sophia's eyes light up with pure wonder at the sight of the meal, while Ruri, ever the pragmatist, sighs and instructs her to help set the table. Spread out before them is a steaming feast of golden fries and a freshly baked pizza, leading Sophia to question if he truly prepared all of this himself. He confirms with a confident smile that he followed the request for party food perfectly, noting the pleasant aroma filling the room. Without wasting another second, the group begins to dig in, with Sophia barely able to contain her excitement as she takes her first bite. They settle into a comfortable rhythm of eating, the previous tension of the massage session replaced by the simple joy of a shared meal. Even the usually composed Ruri finds herself drawn in by the appetizing spread, admitting her hunger and reaching for a slice of the pizza. As she takes a bite, her eyes widen in surprise at the unexpected, stretchy texture of the topping, which seems to defy the laws of standard pizza. He watches her reaction with a knowing look, explaining that the secret ingredient is mochi, which gives the dish its unique, melting quality. He proudly presents his creation, dubbing it the Parisian mochi with juicy mochi pizza, explaining that the goal is to load up on carbohydrates to build body mass. As the group looks at the dish, he elaborates on the science behind it, noting that while iron and fat are often cited for muscle growth, carbohydrates are essential for expanding the muscles. Because of this high density, Ruri observes that even a standard portion provides significantly more nutrition than usual, while a comparison chart highlights how mochi surpasses both white rice and bread in carbohydrate content per gram. He adds that the potato side dish isn't just filler, as it provides necessary vitamin C and fibers to balance the meal. Taking a large bite, Sophia finds the texture unusual but incredibly satisfying, noting how the mochi doesn't overpower the rich tomato sauce. She begins to feel a strange sensation, imagining the mochi and cheese piling up and flowing directly to the parts of her body that had been active earlier. This realization culminates in a wave of intense pleasure, leaving her breathless and flushed as the flavors overwhelm her senses. After the initial shock wears off, she and Ruri sit in a blissful daze, humming with satisfaction while their host watches them. Suddenly, the two women burst into a frenzy, Sophia demanding seconds while Ruri praises the contrast between the crunchy exterior and puffy interior, leaving him scrambling to keep up with their requests. Despite the chaos, she expresses a desire to eat this every day, though Ruri seems to find the whole situation somewhat unfair as he tries to maintain some semblance of order. He stands frozen, plate in hand, as a preposterous suggestion hangs in the air. Ruri, with a mischievous glint, proposes that he should become Midori's boyfriend just so the older woman can enjoy his cooking every day. Before he can even process the absurdity, Sophia chimes in, declaring her intention to frequent his home for the same reason. The sheer audacity of the proposal leaves him stammering in confusion, while Ruri herself seems startled by the momentum of the conversation. He finds himself backed into a corner as Sophia leans in with overwhelming intensity, her gaze fixed on him with a playful yet predatory heat. She presses the issue, her voice a low purr as she asks for his answer, completely ignoring Ruri's frantic attempts to regain control of the situation. His face flushes a deep crimson, his composure shattering under the weight of her sudden, bold proximity. The chaotic energy of the dining room finally erupts, the sound of their startled cries and frantic protests echoing far beyond the walls of the house. Into the stillness of the night, a chorus of shocked exclamations rings out, marking a turbulent end to what was supposed to be a simple meal. The young woman with long, jet-black hair clings tightly to Shin's arm, her sudden proposal that he become her boyfriend catching everyone off guard as she looks up at him expectantly. She leans in even closer, her lack of personal boundaries leaving the young man visibly flustered as he struggles to process the word boyfriend. He lets a strange, almost unsettling grin spread across his face as he considers the prospect, though the blonde woman nearby watches with a look of pure revulsion. She intervenes quickly, grabbing the younger girl and pulling her back while demanding to know why she would want someone she has only just met, her gaze fixed firmly on the intruder. She narrows her eyes in a sharp glare, the air between the two women growing thick with tension as the girl in the tracksuit is scrutinized. She remains undeterred by the scrutiny, however, and begins to list his virtues, noting his attractive features and the sense of security he projects. She continues her praise by highlighting their shared interest in gaming and the incredible quality of the food he prepares, watching for his reaction. She notices that her words are having an effect, as the young man finds it difficult to feel bad about the situation while being showered with such compliments. He listens as the girl takes the conversation in a professional turn, mentioning her agency's management team and their role in her life. She goes on to complain about the funky food her management team forces her to eat, claiming they have no regard for taste while the others watch in bewilderment. She continues her animated explanation, her dialect becoming so thick that Ruri struggles to follow. Shin, however, begins to recognize the familiar cadence, suspecting they might share a common hometown. Upon hearing his suspicion, she lunges forward, gripping his hand with sudden intensity as they compare local landmarks. Ruri watches from the sidelines, her expression souring as the two find common ground in their shared origins. This revelation sends her into a state of pure euphoria, convinced that their meeting is nothing short of divine providence. Her joy is a sharp contrast to the growing irritation radiating from the other woman. The light-haired woman desperately tries to reclaim his attention, pleading with him not to leave her behind as he prepares to engage with his handheld device. Her voice carries a note of uncharacteristic vulnerability. She quickly pivots to a more assertive stance, demanding priority over his culinary skills and reminding him of her established role. He can only offer a look of mild bewilderment at her sudden possessiveness. The tension boils over as both women begin a heated tug-of-war over his services, each claiming him as their own personal chef. Midori goes a step further, boldly declaring him her cooking boyfriend to seal the deal. He finds himself caught in the middle of their bickering, a small part of him flattered by the sudden surge in his popularity. Despite the chaos, he attempts to play the peacemaker, urging them to stop their fighting for his sake. His attempts at mediation fail as the two continue to trade barbs, their argument escalating into a full-blown confrontation over who has the greater claim. He begins to realize that their passion might be more about his cooking than his companionship. By the following day, the atmosphere has shifted toward a tentative cooperation as the trio gathers in the kitchen to prepare a meal together. Under the watchful eye of the older woman, they navigate the complexities of washing rice and adjusting heat, turning the chore into a collaborative effort. They eventually settle around the table to enjoy the fruits of their labor, a unique blend of ingredients designed for health and flavor. The meal is punctuated by light-hearted critiques and the older woman's gentle reminder to maintain a quiet, respectful atmosphere while they eat. The young man enters the living room, carrying a tray of food. He observes Midori and Ruri, who look exhausted from their attempt to get along. He comments on their tired appearance, noting that today was supposed to be the day they finally bonded. The peace doesn't last. A few hours later, the kitchen is a battlefield of culinary incompetence. Midori and Ruri are bickering over the microwave and the correct route for food preparation, their voices rising in frustration. He tries to mediate, but the two women are locked in a heated exchange about who should be doing what, forcing him to step in and take control of the situation before things spiral further. The next day at college, the domestic chaos follows him in spirit. A classmate approaches him, sheepishly asking to borrow a report he forgot. Shin, looking drained, hands it over as they walk through the campus. He finds a moment of escape in a handheld game, his face contorted with intense focus and frustration. The buttons click rapidly under his thumbs as he vents his pent-up stress through the digital challenge, his brow furrowed in concentration. His friend notices the unusual intensity and asks what's wrong. He can only offer a weary apology, his mind still reeling from the events at home. The young man begins to recount the ordeal, explaining how Midori and Ruri's attempt to be friendly devolved into a disastrous cooking session. He tells his friend how their help became a hindrance, eventually leading him to lose his temper and scold them both for their behavior. As a form of punishment for the chaos, he reveals the strict dietary regimen he's imposed on Ruri. He describes a specific, high-calorie menu of convenience store food, chicken, udon, and tomato juice, exceeding 2,400 calories a day, which he intends to monitor closely. Later, while he continues to play his game, Midori sits beside him, captivated by the nostalgia of the screen. His friend watches the pair, posing a hypothetical question about what he would do if the culprit of his troubles sat right next to him. She, however, seems entirely unfazed by the previous day's scolding. With a determined look, she declares that one should never look back at past failures and must always keep moving forward, a sentiment he finds ironically bold given the circumstances. Their focus shifts to a peaceful ranch simulation game on the screen. She remarks on how healing it is to manage the digital animals and asks if he also enjoys the quiet passion of simulation games, seeking a moment of calm after the recent domestic storm. Shin is engrossed in Makiba Storia, a slow-paced simulation game. He explains the appeal of Sophia, a character he can marry in the game's setting, finding comfort in the relaxed experience. Beside him, Midori watches the screen with interest. He points out Sophia's reliability and how easily her affection levels rise with local items. Midori, perhaps feeling a bit defensive of her favorite, playfully asks if he's mocking her waifu, though she secretly admits to choosing Sophia many times herself. Their private moment is interrupted when a group of fellow students approaches their table. One of the girls leans in, surprised to see Midori, and asks if she actually enjoys playing video games. The group's curiosity grows as they realize she's familiar with the title. They press her for details, eager to know which character she prefers, while Midori tries to maintain her composure under the sudden spotlight. She quickly deflects, claiming her interest stems from her siblings' hobbies rather than her own. However, Shin notices the subtle shift in her demeanor. Despite her excuses, it's clear she shares his preference for Sophia, even if she's hesitant to admit it to the crowd. One of the visiting students explains that they simply wanted an excuse to strike up a conversation with her. Midori remains quiet, her expression unreadable as she processes the unwanted attention. The group lingers, chatting amongst themselves about their successful greeting. They seem pleased with the interaction, oblivious to the awkwardness they've introduced to the quiet corner. Their questions turn more personal as they inquire about the nature of her relationship with Shin. They compliment her beauty and extend an invitation to join their club, further crowding the small space. He finds it impossible to focus on his game amidst the rising chatter and prying eyes. The peaceful atmosphere has been completely shattered by the social intrusion, leaving him frustrated and unable to enjoy his digital escape. He eventually concludes that the college campus is hardly the ideal environment for gaming. When one seeks a truly uninterrupted experience, it's clear that a more private sanctuary is required. He sits cross-legged on the floor, his attention momentarily diverted from the handheld console in his grip as a vision in elaborate fabric enters the room. The young woman stands before him, draped in a complex, multi-layered outfit that seems to belong to another world, her hands clasped shyly as she introduces herself as Sophia. Because of his stunned silence, she leans closer, a playful glint in her eyes as she reaffirms her new identity. She explains that in this moment, she isn't just his companion, but the character Sophia, and he is her Gyeonkun. The proximity of her face and the intricate details of the costume leave him breathless, his face flushing a deep crimson. She admits that this particular ensemble was one she crafted long ago and felt a sudden urge to revisit, clearly pleased by the sheer shock written across his features. She suggests they engage in a bit of roleplay to fully inhabit their characters, seizing the opportunity of their privacy. She leans over him, the fabric of her bodice straining as she explains that Sophia is known for providing healing to her husband, her voice dropping to a soft, inviting murmur. She gently but firmly pulls him toward her, guiding his head down before he can offer a coherent response. He stammers a weak protest, but the words die in his throat as the soft reality of the situation takes hold. He feels a wave of conflicting emotions, the sheer absurdity of the theater clashing with the undeniable comfort of her lap, and he can't help but feel a bit foolish for how much he is enjoying the attention. She has him settled comfortably, positioned so she can watch the screen of his game over his shoulder. He remains reclined against her, the weight of his head supported by her legs, while she gazes down at him with an expression of pure, unadulterated affection. The room falls into a comfortable silence, save for the electronic chirps of the game, as they settle into this new dynamic. As the minutes pass, his initial frustration with the day's earlier interruptions begins to evaporate entirely. He realizes that any lingering annoyance has been replaced by a sense of calm, even if he still feels a lingering embarrassment at their current arrangement. Looking up from his game, he catches her eye and asks if this elaborate display is her way of apologizing for the teasing and chaos of the past few days. He wonders if the costume and the healing are a peace offering for the stress they've shared. He watches as she simply offers a tender, knowing smile, brushing aside the notion of a formal apology. She tells him that she is acting on her own desires, providing this comfort simply because she wants to, regardless of whether he fully understands the history behind the character she has chosen to become. She recalls her high school days, a time of deep anxiety. When she first decided to move to Tokyo, her thick regional accent was a source of constant worry. Her classmates often looked on in confusion, unable to grasp a single word she said, leaving her feeling isolated and misunderstood in the crowded hallways. He was the one who finally broke that barrier. A young Nakasa Shin had approached her with a confident smile, explaining that he recognized her dialect because it was the same one his mother spoke. With a friendly gesture, he offered to be her guide, bridging the gap that her accent had created and offering a sense of belonging she hadn't expected to find. Years later, she sits alone in the quiet of her room, reflecting on those memories while finishing a simple meal. The weight of the past seems lighter now, though the echoes of those early struggles still linger in the way she carries herself. Their connection remains anchored in the present through the glow of a smartphone screen. A series of messages reveals a softening of tensions. He admits to having calmed down and offers to cook for her again, a gesture of reconciliation that she meets with genuine relief and warmth. She then turns her attention to the calendar on her wall, marking the passage of time with a renewed sense of purpose. With only 2 weeks remaining until a significant date, she resolves to shift the atmosphere between them, determined to restart their dynamic on better terms. Ruri begins her morning routine with a refreshing shower, the water cascading over her as she prepares for the day ahead. After stepping out, she stands before the bathroom mirror, the hum of the hairdryer filling the room as she carefully styles her long, light-colored locks. Pausing for a moment, she turns slightly to inspect her reflection, ensuring every detail is perfect before moving on. She then steps onto the scale, checking her weight with a focused expression, a necessary step in her meticulous preparation. With her hair and body ready, she leans in close to the mirror to apply the finishing touches to her makeup, a small smile playing on her lips as she psychs herself up for what's to come. Meanwhile, at the bustling Ikebukuro station, Shin stands near the ticket gates, his eyes glued to his phone as he tries to calm his racing heart, reminding himself to do his best on this upcoming day. He lets out a heavy sigh, the weight of the word date echoing in his mind as he waits amidst the flow of commuters. Watching other couples meet and greet each other only heightens his anticipation, making the minutes feel like hours as he checks his surroundings. Suddenly, a stylishly dressed figure catches his eye, the click of heels on the station floor signaling an arrival. As he looks up, he sees Ruri, looking radiant in a sophisticated dress. She greets him with a cheerful smile, thanking him for waiting and relieved to have made it just in time. Shin is momentarily speechless, but when he finally finds his voice, he playfully teases her about how much the outfit transforms her, prompting an indignant but playful demand for a real compliment. She stands at the station, waiting, when Midori suddenly appears with a cheerful greeting. The two discuss their arrival, with Midori playfully noting that they should have come together since they live nearby, though Ruri insists on the importance of the correct order. Shin stands by, watching the exchange as they prepare to head toward the Fukuda line. As they walk through the crowded station, Midori's striking appearance draws immediate attention from passersby. Whispers follow them, with onlookers marveling at her outfit and wondering if she is a professional model. Shin, noticing the intense stares, feels a wave of self-consciousness, while Midori basks in the praise, encouraging even more. Despite the initial plan, she finds herself caught in what has unexpectedly become a three-person outing. She questions how the situation evolved into this, while Midori clings to Shin's arm, radiating excitement for their day together. Shin looks caught in the middle, unsure of how to handle the dual attention. This current harmony is a sharp contrast to the events of a few days prior, following a heated quarrel. They had been sternly reprimanded and informed that, for the time being, any further fighting was strictly prohibited. The weight of that decree still hangs over them as they sit together in a quiet moment of reflection. Seeking a moment of clarity, she reaches out and firmly pulls Shin away from the group. Once they are alone, she softens her expression and offers a sincere apology for the trouble they caused him. Shin, surprised by her vulnerability, quickly assures her that it's fine, urging her to be honest about her feelings. With the air finally cleared, the group reconvenes in a more relaxed setting. They acknowledge that while things could have been handled better, the important thing is that they have finally made up and can move forward. Seizing the positive mood, Midori leans in close to Shin, her eyes sparkling with a new proposal. She suggests that they should go on a commemorative date over the weekend to celebrate their reconciliation, ignoring the stunned silence from the others. The suggestion immediately sends Ruri into a panic, as she loudly protests the idea of a date. She reminds Midori that as childhood friends, they shouldn't be fighting over such things, her composure momentarily shattered by the bold suggestion. Ignoring the outburst, Midori turns back to Shin to discuss the practicalities, wondering if her talent agency would even allow such an outing given her status as a cosplayer. Shin remains contemplative, weighing the possibility as the group's dynamic shifts once again. He watches as Midori beams with an infectious energy, explaining her theory that a woman in love releases hormones that make her even more beautiful. She suggests that while it might be a placebo effect, it is best to keep such feelings hidden if possible, though her own joy is barely contained as she addresses him directly. Beside him, Ruri stands frozen, the word hormones echoing in her mind as she processes the implications of Midori's bold declaration. Breaking her silence, she suddenly interjects with a desperate enthusiasm, suggesting that since they are currently forbidden from fighting, she should be allowed to join this date, as well, unwilling to be left behind. The group eventually moves on, the city skyline stretching out before them as they head toward their destination, Yasuoya, with a mix of anticipation and uncertainty about what the day holds. Upon arriving at the massive fabric store, he is immediately overwhelmed by the sheer variety of materials surrounding them, his eyes wide as he takes in the specialized environment. While Midori darts ahead with excitement, he glances down at his phone, feeling a wave of self-consciousness over the elaborate date plan he had researched and prepared, which now feels entirely useless in this setting. She soon returns to his side to share the triumphant news that she secured a total victory in the recent cosplay event, prompting him to ask if her visit today is specifically to purchase a new costume. Instead of a direct answer, she begins meticulously feeling the textures of the various fabrics on display, accepting his congratulations with a playful smile. The young woman leans in close to test the softness of a particular material. Her proximity and the tactile nature of the task cause his heart to race as he struggles to maintain his composure. Sensing his nervousness, she turns the outing into a challenge, asking him if he knows what most people tend to overlook when they attempt cosplaying for the very first time. She reveals the answer with a flourish, emphasizing that the quality of the fabric is what most beginners overlook. While Shin and Ruri look on with puzzled expressions, she reaches out to feel the material, demonstrating the importance of tactile sensation. Continuing her lesson, she explains that while color and shape are eye-catching, neglecting the texture can result in a garment that looks more like a flimsy Halloween costume than a true cosplay. Shin finally understands the reason behind her meticulous inspection, while Ruri, satisfied with her own selections, prepares to head to the register. As they move through the aisles, Shin notices Ruri lingering near the fabric rolls and inquires about her purchases. She clarifies that she is merely browsing for now, but her focus quickly shifts as she realizes one of their party is missing. The group eventually reconvenes and exits the massive store, the towering building looming behind them as they set their sights on the next destination, the specialized otaku shops nearby. They enter a new establishment, its shelves packed with a dizzying array of specialized supplies that cater to every niche of the hobby. While navigating the narrow aisles, Shin pauses to examine the stock, his curiosity piqued by the sheer variety of items on display. He is soon joined by Ruri, who proudly presents a set of specialized markers, explaining that these two are essential tools in a cosplayer's arsenal. She speaks with a quiet intensity, noting that dedicating herself to her craft is simply her way of life. She goes on to describe a technique for using oil-based pens to add depth and gradient tones to synthetic wig fibers, a level of detail that leaves Shin reeling. The realization that cosplay involves such intricate painting is a revelation he hadn't expected. With their shopping finally complete, the weight of their haul becomes apparent, prompting Shin to step in and offer his assistance. Ruri hands over her heavy bag with a word of thanks, while Midori watches the exchange with a playful glint in her eye. She then turns her gaze toward him, her expression unreadable as she asks if she should also carry Midori's bags, or if he prefers to be the one to handle everything himself. She stands at the checkout counter, finalizing a substantial purchase of over 40,000 yen. While she handles the transaction, her companions wait nearby, with the young man already burdened by several shopping bags. He seems lost in thought, perhaps contemplating the mounting cost of their excursion. As the outing progresses, she leads the way through various boutiques, her energy seemingly boundless compared to her male companion, who has resorted to crouching on the floor to rest his aching legs. What started as a social gathering has transformed into an intensive shopping marathon, leaving him to wonder if the term date even applies anymore. Emerging back onto the bustling city streets, she points toward their next destination with infectious enthusiasm. Beside her, the dark-haired woman smiles brightly, clearly enjoying the day, while the young man follows behind, his arms full of their collective spoils. He finally finds a moment of respite, slumping into a seat and drawing deeply from a cold drink through a straw. The physical toll of the day is evident in his weary expression as he sighs, admitting to himself and his companions just how exhausted he has become. While the two women remain lively, poring over their latest finds and discussing their next move, he leans back, finally able to catch his breath. He reflects on the stark difference in their stamina, visualizing the efficient, direct path a man takes through a store versus the winding, exhaustive journey preferred by his companions. She turns to her friend, seeking confirmation for her excitement, and receives an enthusiastic nod in return. Their shared passion for their hobby keeps their spirits high, seemingly oblivious to the fatigue weighing down their friend. The group eventually settles into a themed cafe, where staff dressed in elaborate, made uniforms navigate between tables. The atmosphere is vibrant, filled with the specific energy of a collaborative event dedicated to a popular series. They lean in close to admire the special Otopera collaboration coffee, their eyes sparkling with delight at the themed presentation. Across the table, he watches them with a faint, tired smile, content to see them so happy despite his own exhaustion. He reveals that their presence here wasn't mere luck. He had been diligent, securing a reservation just as a cancellation opened up a rare spot in the fully booked venue. His foresight earns him high praise from the dark-haired woman, who is thrilled by the opportunity. She becomes overwhelmed with emotion, clutching a commemorative item and expressing her profound gratitude to the creators of the series. It turns out she has been a dedicated visitor, returning every week to complete a full set of loyalty points, a level of commitment that leaves him momentarily speechless. She continues to scroll through her device, her eyes fixed on the vibrant images of the collaboration. While she admits to being unfamiliar with the specific game, she can't help but admire the quality of the promotional materials. Across the table, Shin watches her, silently questioning if she is truly enjoying the experience. Her quiet contemplation is interrupted when Ruri leans in, casually asking for permission to post a photo of her face on social media. The request catches her completely off guard, her face flushing as she stammers out a confused response, wondering if Ruri means on her personal account. Seeing her hesitation, Ruri becomes even more animated, her eyes sparkling as she confesses to being a longtime fan. She practically begs for the chance to share the moment, holding her phone out for confirmation. Shin can only watch the exchange with a mix of amusement and bewilderment as the two women bond over the digital display. The air is filled with the rhythmic chiming of notifications as the post goes live. She stares at the screen, perhaps a bit overwhelmed by the sudden digital attention, while Ruri remains focused on the device, her energy undiminished by the rapid-fire pings. Suddenly, the high energy dissipates as Ruri lets out a heavy sigh, declaring that the moment has come to an end. She rests a hand on her friend's shoulder, a gesture of parting that leaves Shin wondering what prompted the sudden shift in mood. Explaining that a work assignment has unexpectedly surfaced, Ruri prepares for a hasty departure. She apologizes to the pair and briskly places a 1,000-yen note on the table to cover her share, leaving them both blinking in surprise at her sudden exit. Left behind is a pristine plate of omuris, untouched by the woman who just departed. Shin bids her a quick farewell, his gaze lingering on the steam rising from the yellow dish that was meant for their companion. With their third companion gone, she turns her attention back to the meal, clasping her hands together in a traditional gesture of thanks before digging in. Shin, realizing his own appetite hasn't been fully sated, watches her with a renewed sense of hunger. As she begins to eat, her inner critic takes over, analyzing the culinary choices of the cafe. She notes that while the omuris is delicious, the choice of yellow egg to represent the character is a bit simplistic. She had hoped for a more faithful recreation of a dish actually featured in the original source material. He takes a bite of his own, finding the texture of the egg to be remarkably soft and satisfying. Despite the technical critiques of his companion, he decides that as long as the food tastes this good, the lack of thematic accuracy is a minor grievance. He flinches slightly, his eyes widening in surprise as a spoonful of food is suddenly thrust toward his face. Across the table, She watches with a playful, expectant glint in her eyes, clearly enjoying his flustered reaction to her sudden offer. She leans back slightly, a hand to her mouth as she lets out a soft, melodic giggle at his bewildered expression. When he asks why she is looking at him with such intensity, she simply continues to beam, her amusement radiating from her as she enjoys this moment of shared intimacy. Her playfulness doesn't end with a simple laugh. She insists that she won't keep the delicious treat all to herself, teasingly suggesting that if he wants a bite, he only needs to say so. A confident, knowing smile plays on her lips, her tongue darting out briefly in a gesture of pure, light-hearted provocation directed at him. He turns his gaze away, his face flushing a deep crimson as he mutters a quiet, embarrassed protest under his breath. The intensity of her teasing and her close proximity leave him momentarily speechless, his heart racing as he struggles to maintain his composure. They sit across from one another in the quiet cafe, the atmosphere settling into a comfortable, if slightly charged, rhythm as they continue their meal. He remarks on how much she has grown, expressing a genuine surprise at her mature appearance in her current attire. She counters his observation with a playful jab, pointing out that his own appetite has certainly increased, as if to deflect the weight of his compliment. He rests his chin on his hand, a small, knowing smile tugging at the corners of his mouth as he watches her. There is a newfound softness in his expression, a quiet acknowledgement of the time that has passed and the person she has become. She finishes her meal with a satisfied sigh, her expression turning bright and determined as she looks at the clock. When he asks what her plans are for the rest of the day, she leans in with a spark of excitement, announcing that since they are finally alone, there is a specific place she wants to take him. He can only watch, a mix of curiosity and apprehension washing over him as the second part of their outing begins. Shin and Ruri walk through the bustling city streets, her arm linked tightly with his in an unusually intimate gesture. He asks where they should head next, feeling a growing sense of unease as he reflects on how strangely she has been acting throughout the day. She presses even closer against him, her silence and the physical proximity making his heart race. He wonders if she is being intentionally provocative or if there is something more to her quiet, intense focus. As they continue their stroll, he tries to rationalize the situation, noting that while the start of their outing was bizarre, her excitement hasn't wavered for a moment. It feels less like a casual walk and more like a deliberate, high-stakes date. He calls out her name, trying to break the spell of her distraction, but she remains immersed in her own world, barely acknowledging his presence as they move forward. Concerned by the deep flush on her face, he reaches out to check her forehead for a fever. She immediately recoils in embarrassment, shouting that he is being gross and demanding to know why he is so familiar with her normal body temperature. He lets out a weary sigh, urging her to maintain some level of composure as they navigate the urban landscape together. His anxiety spikes as they pass the entrance of a hotel piece, the prominent signs for hourly rates and day use looming over them. For a terrifying moment, he fears this might be her intended destination. They walk past the establishment without stopping, and he lets out a nervous laugh of pure relief, though the underlying tension of the day remains thick between them. Finally, they arrive at their true destination, and he looks ahead with a mix of confusion and dawning realization. Standing before the storefront of Tay, he stares in stunned silence at the elaborate displays of feminine lingerie. The reality of why she was so insistent on this trip finally hits him, leaving him completely flabbergasted. He stands frozen at the entrance, his face flushed with embarrassment as the shop staff offers a warm welcome. Desperate for an escape, he stammers about finding a bench or heading to the restroom, but his companion is having none of it, playfully accusing him of being a pervert for lingering at the threshold. Because of his hesitation, she firmly takes hold of his sleeve, her own cheeks tinged with a slight pink hue as she pulls him toward her. She insists that he remain by her side, leaving no room for further protest. She startles him with the sudden proximity, a cry escaping his lips as she reiterates her command for him to stay close and behave. She mentions needing to check a directory further in, leaving him to follow in a state of utter bewilderment. Moments after she leaves him to check a directory, he finds himself navigating the aisles, a lone figure surrounded by rows of delicate garments. The sheer scale of the shop and the nature of the merchandise weigh heavily on him as he walks deeper into the store. As the reality of his situation sinks in, he lets out a nervous, strained laugh, his mind racing with questions about how he ended up in such a predicament. His eyes dart around, taking in the unfamiliar environment with a mixture of awe and intense discomfort. Reaching a wall adorned with various styles, he is greeted by another cheerful staff member who encourages him to browse. He attempts to maintain a composed facade, though his wide eyes and stiff posture betray his internal panic. His attention is drawn to a nearby mannequin showcasing an intricate lace set, and he quickly looks away, his face burning. The shop assistant, noticing his unease, kindly mentions that couples frequently visit the establishment and invites them to take as much time as they need. Nearby, he notices another man actively participating in the shopping experience, debating the merits of different colors and styles with his partner. Seeing someone else in the same position provides a momentary sense of relief, as he realizes he isn't as conspicuous as he feared. He stares at the displays once more, a new thought beginning to form as he observes the other couple's casual enthusiasm. The idea that this could be a normal, shared activity starts to take root, though he still finds it difficult to fully grasp. Watching the pair finalize their selection with excitement, he begins to understand that his companion's intentions might have been simpler than he imagined, perhaps just looking for practical items like padding. He follows after her, his initial shock slowly giving way to a quiet, resigned acceptance of a day's unusual turn. He finds himself in a compromising position as Ruri, clad in delicate lace, leans over him with an intensity that borders on the predatory. She insists that they must see this through to the end, citing some dubious internet wisdom about physical contact and its effects on her figure. Her enthusiasm is overwhelming, leaving him pinned and utterly bewildered by her logic. The young man quickly retreats into his own thoughts, desperately trying to rationalize the situation as a mere preparation for her cosplay. He shakes his head vigorously, rejecting the scandalous implications of her words while his imagination runs wild with the absurdity of her claims. Standing alone outside the curtained stalls, he grumbles to himself about the wait. The initial shock has faded into a restless irritation, and he questions why he is even required to stand guard when he could be home playing games. Suddenly, the quiet of the shop is shattered by the sound of a door sliding open and a frantic plea from a staff member. The employee's voice carries a note of desperate urgency, signaling that something has gone awry within the private dressing area. Before he can react, Ruri bursts out into the public aisle, still wearing nothing but the skimpy lingerie she was meant to be trying on. He freezes in place, his eyes widening in pure horror as she charges toward him, completely oblivious to her lack of attire. Her face is a mask of overwhelming emotion, tears welling in her eyes as she looks up at him. It is a look of profound realization and triumph, as if she has just achieved a long-sought-after goal. She throws herself at him with reckless abandon, her arms wrapping around his neck as she cries out in victory. She babbles about her weight increasing and the strange sensation in her chest, convinced that her bizarre plan has actually worked. With a radiant, almost manic grin, she pulls back slightly to announce her success to the world. She proudly declares that she has finally reached a C-cup, her joy at this physical milestone completely eclipsing any sense of modesty. Nearby, the shop assistant stands frozen, her face pale with shock as she witnesses the scandalous display unfolding in the middle of the store. The professional decorum of the establishment has been utterly dismantled by the girl's sudden outburst. Realizing the gravity of the situation, the young man frantically tries to shove Ruri back toward the safety of the fitting room. He moves with desperate speed, hoping to end the public spectacle before the situation escalates any further. He lets out a heavy sigh, the weight of the public spectacle finally catching up to him as the shop staff manages to usher the exuberant girl back into the privacy of the fitting room. He watches as the curtain is drawn, and the shop assistant confirms that the measurements were indeed correct, noting that she has reached a C-cup, while the young woman remains unapologetically scantily clad and continues her conversation. She continues to boast about her physical progress, practically preening in her new lace undergarments and mockingly asking if the sight of her improved figure is enough to move him to tears. She remains focused on this milestone and her critique of different manufacturers, but he remains unimpressed, his expression flat as he struggles to find the enthusiasm she clearly expects. His patience finally snaps, and he bellows for her to stop the display and get dressed immediately, leaving her startled and questioning his sudden outburst before she lets out a frustrated cry of her own. Away from the chaos of the store, a large truck rumbles past the storefront, its engine noise filling the street. A short while later, the two of them sit quietly on a public bench, the cool air helping to settle the frantic energy of the afternoon as he checks to see if she has finally regained her composure. She responds with a mischievous laugh, claiming she was merely playing the part of someone who doesn't get embarrassed, before suddenly bolting toward the street with a wild joke about being transported to another world by a passing vehicle, forcing him to give chase. After he manages to catch up and lead her back to the bench, he reaches into his bag and offers her a small candy, hoping the simple gesture will help ground her. She accepts the sweet, her gaze softening as she realizes the sincerity of his concern, while he reflects on the fact that, despite the chaos, they have managed to cross one more goal off their list. He reflects on their journey, comparing the challenges they faced to a game where he simply identified problems and devised strategies to overcome them. With genuine humility, he attributes their ultimate success to her efforts, offering his sincere congratulations for how far they have come. She initially accepts the praise with her usual bravado, claiming such a result was only natural given her involvement. However, her demeanor shifts as she settles onto the bench, her gaze dropping to her swinging feet. In a rare moment of quiet vulnerability, she admits that the credit for their progress actually belongs to him. He is caught completely off guard by her sudden sincerity. He reflects on her often foul-mouthed personality and how easily she provokes his anger, yet he realizes that, deep down, he never truly expected their shared experiences to manifest into such a tangible, meaningful reality. She allows a gentle smile to play on her lips as she recalls a specific lesson he taught her, that food could actually be something to be enjoyed. It is a simple realization, but one she admits she will cherish as they move forward. She turns to him with a more serious expression, confessing that there is something she has long desired to tell him. He watches her closely, sensing the sudden weight of her words and the shift in the evening air. She leans in close, her voice dropping to a teasing whisper as she begins to speak. The proximity causes a deep, visible flush to creep up his neck, his heart racing as she maintains her playful, knowing gaze just inches from his face. He is left utterly bewildered when she suddenly pulls back, her attention shifting entirely to her mobile device. He watches, confused and still flustered, as she taps away at the screen with focused intensity, leaving his question hanging in the air. She finally presents her phone, revealing a heartfelt message of gratitude that she couldn't bring herself to say aloud. Despite the sweetness of the text, she maintains a haughty, prideful front, looking away to hide her own embarrassment as he stares at the glowing screen in disbelief. Shin and Ruri walk through the city, their shopping bags in hand. A cheerful couple stops them, suggesting a double date at a nearby restaurant. Shin quickly declines the offer, stating they are perfectly fine on their own. Ruri, however, is barely paying attention, her thoughts consumed by the intense business she intends to conduct once they return to her room. The couple's friendly invitation is met with a polite but firm dismissal from Shin, who seems eager to continue their journey alone. Because of her sudden urgency, they hurry toward the train station. Shin struggles to keep up with her pace, questioning why they need to rush home so quickly and accusing her of being silly. She ignores his skepticism, insisting that she has important matters to attend to and urging him to move faster, claiming that she isn't lying about the importance of her task. Upon arriving at her apartment, she steps inside with a determined look. She mutters about needing to start her preparations immediately, reaching out to flip the light switch and banish the shadows from the room, her mind focused entirely on the task at hand. The reason for her excitement is finally revealed as she joyfully embraces her precious cosplay costume. She beams with pure joy, cradling the outfit as if it were a long-lost friend, her intense business finally coming to light in the form of this cherished possession. While she is lost in her joy, he is back in his own space, running a hand through his hair in frustration. He is still trying to process her cryptic words, wondering what kind of elaborate plan she is hatching now. The phrase intense business rings in his ears, leaving him more confused than ever as he tries to make sense of her sudden shift in priorities. He continues to dwell on the strange turn their date took, from a shopping trip to a sudden departure from an underwear store. He realizes that his lack of dinner plans was a blessing in disguise, as her whims are far too unpredictable for a formal reservation. He concludes that cooking at home is much more efficient, especially when dealing with someone as impulsive as her. He reflects on the day's events, noting how they were perceived as a restless couple. Behind him, Ruri begins to undress, seemingly oblivious to his presence or the lack of privacy. The young man quickly averts his gaze, his face flushing with embarrassment as he catches her reflection in the window. She, however, continues to hum a light tune, completely at ease while she strips down to her lingerie. His composure breaks entirely as he shouts for her to close the curtains, calling her a lewd woman and demanding she learn some modesty. The room is filled with his frantic protests while she remains unbothered by his outbursts. Despite the chaotic display, a soft smile plays on his lips as he watches her. He muses to himself that rather than a romantic partner, she feels more like a troublesome younger sister who requires constant looking after. She suddenly breaks his train of thought by asking about their upcoming photo shoot. He is caught off guard, his confusion evident as he questions what shooting she is referring to while she stands there, still mostly undressed, holding up a piece of her costume. The energetic woman clarifies her plans, pointing out a reservation she made at a studio for the following Sunday, the 16th. He glances at the calendar on the wall, trying to keep up with her rapid-fire scheduling and the sudden mention of a formal meeting. While he remains skeptical about the logistics of the studio, she dismisses his concerns with a confident wave of her hand. She insists that he leave everything to her, promising that she has every detail of the operation covered. To illustrate her point, she presents a vision of the location, which perfectly mimics the fantasy setting of the Otapara works. She explains with infectious enthusiasm how the environment will enhance the role-playing and create a perfect illusion for their project. He can only stare in silence, momentarily stunned by the sheer scale of her ambition. She continues her explanation, noting that the character Katlia's birthday falls on the 18th, just 2 days after their session. Her goal is to have the portfolio ready for a massive online festival celebrating the occasion, ensuring their work gains maximum visibility and joins the digital celebration. She had just dropped a bombshell about the schedule, and the weight of it finally hits him. He gasps as the realization of the character's birthday sinks in, his face slick with a nervous sweat. Because of this revelation, he stares intensely at the calendar, his eyes wide with panic. The 16th is circled in red, the true deadline for the C-Cup project, and he curses his own misunderstanding, having assumed it was an offline event like the last one. Moments later, he stands by a window, sheepishly scratching his head while offering a flurry of apologies. He tries to downplay the situation as beginner's luck, but the voice from the other side remains unimpressed by his lack of communication. In response, she reminds him that today is about more than just schedules. She wants him to witness the culmination of their shared efforts. He watches, his expression a mix of anticipation and trepidation, as she prepares to reveal the final product. Suddenly, she steps into view, fully transformed into the character Katlia. The intricate, form-fitting white and gold armor-like costume clings to her curves, and she offers a confident smile, thanking him for his patience. The costume is a marvel of detail, but as she moves, the sheer tightness of the bodice becomes apparent. The fabric is pulled taut across her chest, highlighting the precision, and perhaps the peril, of the fit. He narrows his eyes, his gaze fixed on a specific detail that seems slightly amiss. A sense of impending mechanical failure begins to dawn on him. While she attempts to strike a heroic pose, he suddenly calls out, pointing toward her side with an urgent warning. She pauses, her confident aura flickering as she senses the shift in his tone. The problem is immediately clear. The side zipper is straining against the fabric, nearly at its breaking point. He stares in stunned silence as the metallic teeth of the fastener groan under the pressure. Realizing the error, she clutches at the stretching fabric, her face flushing with embarrassment. She admits that while she focused entirely on the bust measurements during the retailoring, she completely neglected the dimensions of her own torso, leaving her in a precarious, albeit impressive, predicament. She has presented him with a startling reality, and he can only nod in contemplation, realizing that her physical transformation is the reason the costume no longer fits correctly. Looking out at the city lights, he admits to himself that such a subtle change would have been impossible to detect without the hard data from the shop, or seeing the results so intimately. Despite the tailoring mishap, she strikes a triumphant pose, declaring this unexpected growth a significant achievement in its own right. He can't help but offer his genuine praise for her dedication, which brings a bright, blushing smile to her face as she basks in the validation. She quickly shifts gears, requesting that he capture a photograph immediately so she can assess her new form with a more objective eye. Leaning in with a mischievous glint, she offers a provocative incentive, suggesting that if he wants a reward, he should take a more suggestive photo of her, claiming she is in the right mood for it. The suggestion sends him into a sputtering panic, his face flushing deep red as she erupts into playful laughter, teasing him for taking her joke so seriously. He tries to regain his composure, noting how much genuine pleasure she seems to derive from her provocative attire, even if it leaves him perpetually off balance. As the clock ticks forward, the concept of her finding such joy in these moments lingers in the quiet air of the room. He eventually turns his focus toward the kitchen, promising to handle the photography after he prepares a meal, insisting that it's a good time for food, and citing a cheat day mentioned on a fan wiki he's been consulting. He begins by surveying the supplies on the counter, his mind racing to construct the ideal nutritional plan for the task at hand. He knows that for her current needs, a standard meal simply won't suffice. While she strikes a confident pose in her intricate costume, he dives into his work with infectious enthusiasm, donning an apron and cap as he promises to craft a dish specifically tailored for her. This sudden shift in focus leaves her momentarily stunned, her expression one of pure bewilderment as she watches him take charge of the kitchen. The result of his labor is soon revealed: 2 meticulously prepared cabbage rolls resting in a clear, savory broth, seasoned with just a hint of dark spices. As they sit together at the table, she takes her first bite and admits that the dish is absolutely perfect, prompting a wave of relief and joy from him as he watches her enjoy the meal he made. He then explains the strategy behind the meal, noting that the pressure to lose weight before a photo shoot often leads to a loss of appetite, which can be dangerous. He warns her that the moment of success is often when one is most prone to a sudden fall. Continuing his lecture, he emphasizes the need for proper nutrition without an excessive calorie count, proudly declaring his creation to be the regulating cabbage roll. She listens intently, her curiosity piqued as she lifts a steaming portion with her chopsticks, ready to experience the full depth of his culinary expertise. The first taste hits her with unexpected intensity, her eyes widening as the complex flavors bloom across her palate, momentarily overwhelming her senses. She finds herself clutching her chest, the sheer richness and perfection of the dish leaving her breathless as the cross-section of the roll reveals the savory filling within. She expresses her gratitude for the meal, her voice muffled by the sheer delight of the first few bites. Shin watches her, explaining that he made a few adjustments to the recipe to elevate the experience, turning a simple dish into something truly celebratory. As she continues to eat, the hidden complexity of the dish begins to reveal itself. Shin details the secret blend of spices, cinnamon, nutmeg, ginger, and bay leaves, carefully tucked away within the cabbage layers so as not to overwhelm the palate at first glance. The young woman finds herself unable to stop, the initial simplicity of the dish giving way to a sensory explosion the moment the cabbage was breached. The aroma of the spices and the rich meat broth mingle into a scent that fills her senses, leaving her breathless and amazed. Because of the potent blend, a sudden heat begins to radiate through her body, causing beads of perspiration to form on her brow. She fans herself, exclaiming at the intensity of the warmth, while Shin observes her reaction with a satisfied, knowing grin. He continues his explanation, noting how the cinnamon provides a relaxing sweetness, while the nutmeg and ginger work to improve circulation and induce sweating. He emphasizes that managing stress is just as vital as the food itself when maintaining a balanced diet. Seeing her flushed state, he asks if the flavors are truly to her liking. She can only offer a blissful, dazed expression, her cheeks pink from both the heat and the sheer pleasure of the culinary experience. With a soft, breathless affirmation, she confirms her delight. The warmth has fully taken hold, leaving her in a state of pure, relaxed contentment. Driven by a singular focus on the flavor, she lifts the bowl to her lips, drinking down every last drop of the savory broth. The joy of the meal consumes her, drowning out everything else until only the taste remains. The harmony of the dish lingers, the aromatic spices, the hearty meat soup, and the gentle embrace of the cabbage all working in perfect unison. It is a balanced, grounding experience that feels uniquely crafted for her. Finally, she looks up, her face glowing and her eyes soft with satisfaction. She describes the sensation as a gentle, comforting taste that has completely restored her spirit. She looks at him with a newfound determination, promising to give her absolute best until the very end of the upcoming shoot. She asks him to keep his eyes on her, a request that leaves him flushed and stammering as he pledges his support. As they continue their meal, he suggests a grand celebration once the work is finished, but the conversation takes a playful, albeit sharp, turn. When he mentions his desire to capture more intimate photos of her as a reward, she immediately recoils, labeling him a creep and a pervert for his transparent intentions. Despite the bickering, the long, chaotic, and often clumsy day they spent together finally draws to a close. The sun sets on their unconventional date, leaving a sense of quiet resolution in the air. In the days that follow, time seems to accelerate, blurring into a focused routine of preparation. He dedicates himself to the kitchen, crafting meals that keep her in peak condition, while she monitors her progress closely, even checking her weight to ensure she is ready for the camera's unforgiving lens. Before they know it, the morning of the photo shoot arrives, bathed in the bright, clear light of a new day. They stand before a grand, historic residence, the chosen stage for the culmination of all their hard work. The rhythmic, rapid-fire clicking of camera shutters echoes through the air outside the studio, a testament to the intense creative energy flowing within its walls. Behind the lens, the focus sharpens on the young woman, who has fully submerged herself in her character, her gaze sharp and predatory as she declares that her target will not be allowed to escape. She remains locked in a dramatic, staged embrace with her armored companion, who playfully chides her as a mischievous fairy while they maintain their theatrical stance for the camera. From the periphery, the young man watches the spectacle with a growing sense of detachment, feeling like a ghost in the room as the photographer moves with practiced efficiency to capture the perfect shot. The photographer beams with unbridled joy at the images appearing on her screen, while the knight admits that the sheer intensity of his partner's stare is enough to make him flush, even as she asks how much longer they must hold the grueling pose. She then directs them into a new arrangement, suggesting they lean into each other to simulate a first encounter, leaving the silent observer standing small and forgotten in the background of the vast studio space. His eyes narrow as the weight of his exclusion becomes a physical presence, the realization of his own isolation in this vibrant world of make-believe settling heavily upon him. He reflects on his initial excitement about visiting the studio, but the reality of the professional cosplay shoot has proven to be an awkward ordeal, making him feel profoundly out of place amidst the high-stakes performance. Despite his internal struggle, the duo continues their intricate dance of poses, their chemistry in front of the camera creating a narrative world that he simply cannot find a way to enter. Suddenly, the energetic photographer breaks the spell, marching toward him and thrusting a heavy bag into his hands with a sharp grunt of exertion, leaving him startled and utterly bewildered by the sudden demand. He stands there, slightly taken aback by the sudden change in the young photographer's demeanor. Ruri offers a quick apology, explaining that Yumiko is notoriously shy around strangers, much like she was during their first encounter. Despite the explanation, he remains skeptical, watching as the girl in the maid outfit bristles at being treated like a child. Ruri playfully assures him that there's no need for concern, as the girl is harmless and certainly won't bite. He ponders the strange situation, considering the girl, whose full name he recalls is Sachiko Yumabayashi. It strikes him as odd that someone her age treats a maid uniform as everyday attire, but he acknowledges her reputation for capturing images of beautiful girls rather than being the subject herself. His internal musings are interrupted when she thrusts a white bag into his hands. Peering inside, he finds it filled to the brim with delicate, artificial flower petals. She quickly clarifies the objective, explaining that she wants him to scatter the petals to recreate a specific entrance scene for the character Katlia. Noticing his earlier lack of engagement, she admits this was a way to ensure he didn't feel left out of the production. Accepting the task, he begins to toss the petals into the air, questioning if his technique is correct. She encourages him enthusiastically, her focus shifting entirely back to the lens of her camera as she prepares for the perfect shot. As the first few petals begin their descent, the woman in the elaborate costume takes a steadying breath. She centers herself, fully immersing into the persona of the fantasy heroine. With a dramatic flourish, she strikes a pose, her long hair and cape billowing as the artificial petals drift around her. The air is thick with the theatricality of the moment, a silent disque escaping her lips as she maintains the character's haughty elegance. The silence is shattered by a sharp cry of disapproval from the photographer. She glares at the digital display of her camera, her face contorted in frustration as she declares the composition a failure due to the uneven distribution of the falling petals. He can only offer a confused apology, unsure of how he failed such a seemingly simple task. Undeterred, she insists on another attempt, instructing him to throw the petals with more force and less precision to achieve the chaotic beauty she demands. He watches as she takes the blame for the previous failure, her expression softening with a playful, apologetic smile. Despite her attempt to lighten the mood, the grueling process begins anew. The photographer demands endless retakes, shouting for more intensity as the assistant struggles to scatter the petals with the required roughness, while the model maintains her poise. The tension peaks when a sudden, sharp command to stop echoes through the room, catching everyone off guard and freezing the action mid-motion. She hunches over her camera with an intense, almost predatory focus, scrutinizing every pixel of the captured images to ensure the lighting and composition meet her exacting standards. Finally, a triumphant cry signals success as the model strikes a perfect, heroic pose amidst a flurry of falling petals that catch the light just right. After the intense session, a refreshing drink is offered to the exhausted assistant, who sits slumped on the floor clutching a large prop, acknowledging that the photographer's obsession with detail truly paid off in the final result. As the group takes a well-deserved break in the spacious studio, the atmosphere shifts from frantic work to casual conversation among the collaborators. The knight approaches, expressing his gratitude for the help and explaining that their group's rule is to have whoever is free handle the background tasks, which allowed him to swap costumes earlier. Recognizing the man from a previous encounter, the assistant questions if they have officially met before, as the memory of seeing him with his companion at a past event begins to surface. The eccentric performer responds with a theatrical laugh, insisting on being addressed by his dramatic stage name, Amethyst, and leaving the assistant to wonder about the quirky nature of his friend's social circle. He chuckles, his expression light as he offers a casual apology for the commotion his group has caused. With a self-deprecating grin, he refers to their circle as a mere band of fools, seemingly unbothered by the chaos of the earlier photo session. Continuing his train of thought, the costumed young man poses a question, asking what the most appealing aspect of their hobby truly is. Shin, however, is stuck on the previous remark, questioning the use of the word fool, while the other remains focused on his philosophical inquiry. Suddenly, he calls for a timeout, his hands forming a T as he begins a rapid countdown that leaves his companion bewildered. The abrupt shift in energy catches Shin off guard, his eyes widening at the theatrical display. Leaning in with an intense, knowing look, he whispers that the ultimate virtue of their craft is simplicity. His gaze is fixed, emphasizing the weight he places on this singular concept. He elaborates on this philosophy, explaining that unlike the complex investments required for writing novels or creating illustrated stories, the barrier to entry for their world is remarkably low. To him, it is a straightforward process of acquiring a costume and putting it on, allowing anyone to find enjoyment without the burden of high expectations or difficult technical skills. Because of this inherent ease, he argues that only a fool would go out of their way to make the process more difficult than it needs to be. Shin listens, finding himself nodding along to the logic, even if the delivery is somewhat eccentric. The conversation takes a more specific turn as he mentions the subtle enhancements Ruri has made to her silhouette, laughing at the idea that such a minor change would even be noticed by an outsider. He considers her the most foolish of them all for obsessing over details that he believes go unseen, a comment that causes Shin's expression to harden with a mix of confusion and irritation. Despite his criticisms, he leaps into a dramatic, wide-armed pose, declaring that such foolish obsession is, in its own way, exceedingly beautiful. His theatricality is on full display as he balances the absurdity of their efforts with a genuine sense of admiration. Watching the display, Shin can't help but feel skeptical, wondering if being called a fool is truly meant as a compliment. He remains crouched on the floor, his face a mask of deadpan disbelief while the knight continues his energetic performance. Shifting the focus back to the work at hand, he gestures toward the set where Ruri is currently posing. She stands elegantly in her ethereal attire, a stark contrast to the boisterous conversation that just took place. She stands with a newfound grace, a stark contrast to the lapis of old who would often lower her head, burdened by a complex about her own physique. Having achieved something she considers significant, she now radiates an undeniable pride, her posture upright and full of confidence as she strikes a pose for the camera. Watching from the sidelines, the young man grows suspicious of the hushed conversation, unaware that his companion is actually acknowledging the rumors that this successful shoot was only possible because of his dedicated efforts. He goes on to offer direct praise, noting how the young man took decisive action and showed genuine care for the girl, something for which she is deeply grateful. The unexpected commendation leaves him momentarily stunned, while his companion looks toward the model, admitting that the radiant expression she now wears makes him feel a twinge of jealousy. She beams with a brilliant, genuine smile, reaching out as if inviting the world into her newfound joy. Captivated by her transformation, he stares in awe as his companion remarks that this is the unmistakable look of a heroine when a protagonist finally enters her heart's true path. In his mind, the triumphant melody of a completed quest begins to play, signaling a moment of profound achievement and clarity. Laughing at the young man's slow realization, the knightly cosplayer admits he is a better person than initially perceived, before confidently asserting his own perfection. However, the sense of finality is short-lived as the mental image of success is overwritten by the warning of a fake clear, a common trope where a new, unexpected development is about to unfold, leaving the rest of the plan in his companion's hands. He continues with a theatrical flair, admitting that he is a fool for beautiful things and that the current scene is truly something to behold. He explains that a thought just crossed his mind. By standing beside Ruri, he believes he can enhance her beauty even further. This bold declaration leaves Shin completely bewildered, wondering if a new rival for Ruri's attention has suddenly emerged. A singular thought takes hold, a realization that by standing beside her, her inherent beauty will only be further magnified. He urges his companion to puff out her chest and strike a truly magnificent pose, his eyes closed in theatrical concentration. She responds with a flustered retort, insisting she already knows what to do before deciding to stand up. Below them, the photographer and her assistant signal their readiness to begin the session. The resulting composition is striking, with her seated regally upon the ornate furniture while he kneels submissively at her feet, creating an irresistible dynamic of power and allure. He watches the display with a sudden spark of realization, a faint blush creeping onto his cheeks as the impact of the scene hits him. On a nearby monitor, the source material for their recreation is displayed, showing a moment of conflict where a character is mocked as a weakling during a low point for their party. The photographer works with enthusiasm, praising the quality of the shots while her assistant notes the shift from horizontal to vertical framing, acknowledging the memorability of the current pose. He maintains a look of profound self-satisfaction, though the observers in the background find his overly dramatic expression somewhat comical. He eventually admits to a minor slip-up, philosophizing that such imperfections are merely a part of human nature, but she is quick to counter his excuse. She warns him that a lack of constant focus will lead to poor facial expressions becoming a habit, her tone sharp yet playful. The photographer breaks into a fit of giggles, teasingly calling them idiots, while her assistant marvels at the genuine look of scorn on the model's face, noting that despite the bickering, the duo seems to be in high spirits. She continues to capture the moment, declaring her intent to take the perfect shot as the two cosplayers maintain their intense, character-driven interaction under the studio lights. She watches through the lens as the knight strikes a flamboyant pose, winking confidently at the camera. Shin stands nearby, his expression souring as he observes the theatrical display. He cannot hide his mounting irritation, his face contorting into a grimace of pure annoyance at the knight's relentless antics. Because of this, he mutters curses under his breath, questioning who the show-off is even trying to impress with such a performance. Meanwhile, the knight remains oblivious, continuing to direct the shoot with a flourish alongside the young woman. The focus shifts to the daring details of the succubus attire, highlighting the provocative design as the light catches the fabric and emphasizes the results of the wearer's dedication. Moments later, she finds herself the center of attention, her face flushing a deep crimson as she is urged to embrace the bold nature of the role for the sake of the shoot. She struggles with the sudden spotlight, her embarrassment growing as her partner playfully teases her about the visible blush creeping across her cheeks. He continues his light-hearted prodding, insisting that her hard work to get in shape shouldn't go to waste by being hidden, while she sharply tells him to be quiet, her embarrassment reaching its peak. The conversation turns toward the strategic value of the imagery, with the group acknowledging that a touch of allure is a powerful tool for gaining traction and going viral on social media. As the session winds down, the photographer presents the captured images on her screen, confirming that the results are exactly as planned and perfectly capture the intended atmosphere. They all gather around to review the final product, noting how the young woman's genuine, flustered reaction created a perfectly natural and amusing expression that elevates the entire photo. She stands in the background as Shin contemplates the chaotic nature of the shoot. He acknowledges that while the resulting photos are humorous thanks to the other's antics, the experience remains frustrating. He recalls that this dynamic mirrors a specific plot point from the original source material involving a character's revenge. He watches as Yumiko turns toward her, inquiring if the constant teasing and the nature of the shoot have caused any genuine distress. Aim stands nearby, observing the interaction as the group takes a brief respite from the flashing lights. She finds herself on the receiving end of his frustration as he points a finger directly at her, demanding to know why she didn't seek proper permission or prepare him for these sudden developments. Flustered and with a deep blush creeping across her face, she stammered that as his guardian, she simply couldn't overlook the opportunity. The young man lets out a frustrated cry, clutching his head in exasperation as he begs for a more logical explanation. The tension fills the ornate room, leaving the rest of the group to watch the unfolding drama in silence. He reminds them all of the agreement they had previously established, his voice tinged with the exhaustion of the day's events. The others listen, though the weight of his argument seems to be lost in the excitement of the successful shoot. He continues his explanation, noting that while the studio environment allows for creative freedom and spontaneous fun, the suddenness of their actions caught him completely off guard. His expression is one of pure bewilderment at their lack of foresight. His outburst is met with amusement from the sidelines, where Aim and Yumiko share a knowing look, with the night-clad youth even chuckling at what he perceives to be a typical lover's spat. Meanwhile, she remains visibly shaken by the confrontation, her face still flushed with embarrassment. They sense the need for a change of pace, and the young maid suggests they move to the next room to continue the session. Claiming she needs to fix her makeup after the exertion and the heat, she prepares to depart, leaving a weary Shin to check the time. She suddenly thrusts a heavy bag into his hands, commanding him to carry her belongings without a second thought. The unexpected weight nearly knocks him off balance, adding another burden to his already taxing day. She laughs lightly, commenting on how much energy they've spent and suggesting they finally take a moment to rest. He follows behind her in the quiet hallway, shoulders slumped under the weight of the luggage, the energetic shoot finally drawing to a close. He feels the weight of their laughter, his face flushing with embarrassment as the others find amusement at his expense. He suggests they take a break, trying to regain some dignity amidst the mockery. Turning his attention to the elf-clad woman, he emphasizes the need for cooperation to ensure their time isn't wasted. She responds with a weary sigh, her gaze drifting as she considers his words, noting that they won't spend the time efficiently if they can't work together. She admits her uncertainty regarding the actions of their companions, her expression turning somber as she contemplates the unpredictable nature of the duo. She confesses that she doesn't quite understand what those two will do next. Suddenly, her mood shifts back to mockery, and she bursts into laughter, labeling him a fool for his earlier bravado. She teases him for acting bold and then failing to follow through, while he can only stand there, stung by her sharp tone. She then warns him to cease his comments, claiming they make her feel self-conscious. He quickly relents, promising not to make any further demands of her for the time being, acknowledging that he won't ask her to do anything right now. He remains puzzled by her shifting demeanor, noting that she is being uncharacteristically vague about her true feelings. He questions if something is wrong, sensing a lack of clarity in her words. Striking a pose, she requests that he provide her with some encouragement, much like a hero would for the character she portrays. She asks for a little push and for him to cheer her up, just as the protagonist would do for Katlia in the story. He stares back at her, his eyes narrowing as he questions whether this request is merely a facade to mask a deeper struggle. He asks if she is trying to hide a bad physical state or something similar behind her playful request. His suspicion is confirmed when she reveals, with a forced laugh, that the stress actually caused her to fall ill the previous day. She admits to having vomited due to the pressure, a revelation that leaves him speechless with shock. She confesses the immense pressure she feels to succeed with this new image, admitting that the thought of the upcoming posts makes her incredibly nervous once the initial adrenaline fades. She explains that she wants to achieve something big, but feels the weight of expectations. She had resolved to maintain her composure, wanting to present only her most professional side today. Despite the internal strain, she pleaded with herself to put in the effort and hold on to her remaining strength until the very end. Observing her from a distance, he couldn't help but sigh, recalling how she had been acting strangely since the start. Meanwhile, she was in a frantic rush, layering on foundation to mask her sickly pallor and ensure no one noticed her physical distress. He remained skeptical, questioning if simply pushing through the exhaustion would be sufficient to get her through the shoot. His attention was suddenly diverted when he stumbled upon a fully equipped kitchen tucked away within the studio's confines. Startled by the discovery, he exclaimed his surprise at the presence of a kitchen in such a place. While she looked on, her own discomfort momentarily eclipsed by his sudden outburst. After reading a notice that permitted the use of the space as long as it was kept clean, he turned to her, inquiring if she felt capable of eating or drinking anything to settle her stomach. She recoiled slightly, warning him that any sudden movement might make her sick, prompting a quick apology from him as he realized his assumption that food was prohibited in the studio was incorrect. Reaching a decision, he extended his hand, his resolve hardening as he realized he needed to take charge of the situation. He gently urged her to step back and find a place to rest, promising that he would prepare something nutritious and efficient to help her overcome the immense pressure she was under. As he moved toward the kitchen with newfound purpose, she watched him, a flicker of hope or perhaps just weary curiosity in her eyes as she waited to see what he would do. He glances at his phone with a playful smirk, questioning what could possibly be going through her mind. Standing before him in an elaborate fairy costume, she keeps her back turned, softly admitting that simply having him watch from the sidelines was all she really needed. Though he tries to urge her to keep moving, the weight of the day's events seems to catch up with her. She eventually slumps against the wall, letting out a heavy, weary sigh.